A new day begins and Kai Yang woke up. He cleaned up and took the broom lying in the corner of the small room and walked out. Standing at the front door, he stretched a little. He looked up at the touch of gray in the dawn sky and closed his eyes while breathing in deeply. He was enjoying this moment of peace before reopening his eyes to start sweeping the ground, cleaning away the dirt and leaves. Dressed in black clothes that were simple and clean, the aged clothing color for no reason highlighted the youth's loneliness and years of isolation here. Kai Yang's spine was as straight as a javelin, and with his face had a meticulous expression. Even though he was completing the lowest ranked job, his actions were very calm. He didn't exert much force on the broom. His body didn't even move that much. With only the rotation of his wrist, the broom moved effortlessly. When his body moved, the dust and trash on the ground seemed to magically accumulate in one place around him, just like they had grown a pair of feet. Kai Yang was the Sky Tower's experimental disciple. For 3 he had trained in the school, but he had only reached the tempered body 3rd stage. Yet the other disciples that had entered at the same time as him had long surpassed him and reached higher stages. They were all able to enter into the main building, pay their respects and make advances towards their futures, while he can only lament about his inadequacy in the outer courts. The tempered body 3rd stage in 3 years cannot be called bad or good, but really mediocre. Helplessly, Kai Yang could only continue to sweep out here in the outer court, working hard to support himself and working hard in training. Sky Tower School is a very unique school. This uniqueness is seen through the ruthless competition between disciples. In the school, the strong are like kings while the weak are eliminated. The strong eat the weak. The law of the jungle in the Sky Tower School is actively followed by all. In other schools you may be able to school friendly competition, brotherly bonds and people working together to achieve the same goal. But in the Sky Tower School you will only be able to false bonds in order to use each other and rise in power. Stepping over each other's bodies is the only way. Under Sky Tower's strict system, it's well known throughout the entire Han dynasty. Although the grounds were not that large, but due to the brutal nature of their disciples, their might is second to none. This is also because each disciple's skill is like a tiger and walking out. No one in all the rivers and lakes dares to provoke them. Though the Sky Tower School has one rule. That's to 14-year-old disciples, the first 3 years of their acceptance is considered the testing phase. In these 3 years, all of the disciples' food, clothing, shelter are provided by the outer court. Disciples only need to focus on cultivating. If in these 3 years you can break through the tempered body, then you are able to enter the inner court to pay respects to your elders and become their students. Of course, you don't need to have a teacher and practice on your own, but the difference in learning by yourself and having a teacher is very large. In a way, the Sky Tower rules do have some flexibility and freedom. In those 3 years, if you don't break through, then you can either leave the school or be demoted to an experimental disciple. Experimental disciple is Kai Yang's current status. He is also Sky Tower School's shame. Compared to normal disciples, their treatment is very different. Experimental disciples must provide for their food, shelter, clothing, for the outer court will no longer waste cultivating resources on these trashes. Once demoted to experimental disciples, you basically can never advance. Unless you manage to increase your cultivation level quickly. Only then will the school let you attempt to become a true disciple. The entire Sky Tower consists of 3,000 disciples, while the experimental disciples, you can count them on your 10 fingers. Kai Yang has faith that he can become a true disciple. For experimental disciples who want to survive in Sky Tower, is like wanting to reach the heavens. Take Kai Yang for example, the current hut that he is living in was built by him, 1 log at a time. The holes on the small roof, he doesn't even have time to fix them. When it rains, the water can't exit properly and builds up in the room. He buys his own clothes, his food he got himself, he is responsible for all his own needs. Kai Yang's small hut is in the school's most remote and most uninhabited location. Generally with such horrendous treatment, it is difficult to endure. That is the reason why the school only has a very small number of these disciples. Most who couldn't break through the tempered body chose to leave, but Kai Yang stayed. Already been kicked out, how is okay? A few months before, when he was made an experimental disciple, Kai Yang accepted a sweeping job to provide for himself. Right now Kai Yang was both an experimental disciple and the tower's little sweeping servant. But just by sweeping to maintain a living is hard. There are times when he is cold or hungry. In this life he had chosen this path. Even so, he didn't play the drums of retreat, because in this life he had chosen this oath and must continue down it. That was what men did. In Kai Yang there was toughness. If you don't hit into the brick wall, then don't look back type of toughness. The sky gradually began to light up as he swept, cleaning the trails, sweeping dust from the space. Even though sweeping itself didn't use a lot of energy, but without food or drink since the morning and constantly moving, Kai Yang was covered in sweat. This had nothing to do with strength. By his physique was very poor. 2 out of 3 meals he was hungry. For anybody living like him, how could their physique be good? Gradually Sky Tower disciples surrounded him. These disciples had woke up early, not to cultivate but to look at him. They had great interest in Kai Yang, looking at him with avid gazes like they were staring at a naked beauty. A sweet fragrance like juicy meat bins wafted. Among those tower disciples gathered around Kai Yang, there was also a tense competitive atmosphere in the air. Looking at each other warily, all held an unfriendly look. Someone in the crowd softly said, "So many people. It's a bit excessive, ah." It was that moment they said, "Do you think anybody can walk this path, huh? Nobody wants you to stay." That statement made the person who spoke embarrassed. For everybody knew why they were gathered, why they were all looking at Kai Yang, all waiting for that moment to come. The deadline was about to arrive. Leaving now was not a pity, if you can grab the funds, and today it is also a harvest. The commotion next to him, Kai Yang naturally knew, though his expression never changed. They will parade themselves every 5 days, 6 times a month. He has already gotten used to it, nothing to make a fuss out of. He also noticed the amount of people in front of him had decreased. They probably had not all arrived yet. As he was being discredited, he turned a blind eye to the people next to him and began to sweep. Following the passage of time, the people around Kai Yang gradually increased. There was roughly 30–40 people present. Kai Yang suddenly stopped and sat down in the middle of the road. Slowly he breathed in the early morning air to restore his own physical stamina. At this movement, the people gathered around him all spread out and surrounded him, with Kai Yang as the center. A tense atmosphere filled the air. It was as if the air no longer flowed. No one looked at each other pleasingly, but all looked intensely at Kai Yang. If people were to see this crowd, they would hold the misunderstanding that expert was in the middle. Or else, how could so many people surround one person like that? In reality, Kai Yang was only an experimental disciple with a tempered body. 3rd stage. Any of the people present were stronger than him. Kai Yang, no need to bother. Why don't you just obediently lie down on the ground, so I can beat you and save some time? Seeing him like this, they really held disdain. How much energy can a tempered body 3rd stage restore? You are going to lose anyway, so why linger? Here. Kai Yang, please think about our fellow disciples' feelings too. We are not like you. After this game we need to go practice. The statement was to let Kai Yang quickly submit and let them beat him, making the act of restoring his internal energy disrespectful to them. Though he just turned a deaf ear, like Buddha Lao. Time continued to pass by. Suddenly the melodious tower bells sounded. It reached the ears of all the disciples surrounding Kai Yang and himself, startling the disciples. The bells tolled 9 times, and from the east the sun rose. It was a new day. Everyone's breathing calmed down, helplessly looking at Kai Yang as he slowly got up. He took up his broom and glanced at the people encircling him. "Choose me, Senior Yang," shouted a person. "I strike lightly. I can guarantee you no pain." "Rubbish. Choose me, I will be merciful. I will end it in one fist, and I promise not to waste everyone's time. Pick me. Pick me." It was very clamorous, just like in a marketplace where vendors were trying to sell their produce and competing on whose produce was fresher. "Kai Yang, you can choose your own opponent," someone reminded. Kai Yang chuckled. Readily he lifted his broom and threw it to the sky. The dozens of pairs of eyes looked up, full of expectation, waited for the broom to fall whilst praying, "Choose me, choose me." Time seemed to slow down. The broom turned a few times in the air and immediately fell on the ground with a loud boom, no longer moving. The broom head pointed into the crowd to a burly teenager. A regretful sound, the crowd full of resentment and resignation. But that burly youngster laughed out loud and rushed out. "Fellow disciples, this brother won this battle today, but Hope's fellow disciple do not blame me." "Che, lucky bastard," one jealously said. "Why couldn't it choose me? For I come every 5 days for a month." "Kaiyang, you aren't doing this on purpose, are you? Don't mention it. I have already come for a full 3 months and not once was I chosen." "Brother, you are more miserable than me." Not miserable, watching a good show." The two brothers looked at each other, smiling secretly too in their hearts. In the courtyard, the others had already dispersed, leaving only Kaiyang and the burly teenager looking at each other. Experimental disciple Kaiyang. Tempered body 3rd stage. Yang Kai introduced to his opponent. Ordinary disciple Zhou Dingjun. Tempered body 5th stage. The burly teenager introduced. Sky Tower disciples were also ranked. From bottom to top are the ordinary disciples, lower base disciples, elite disciples, and core disciple. The 5 ranks. Zhou Dingjun said that he was an ordinary disciple. That means he has yet to pay his respects and doesn't have a mentor. If the breakthrough of the tempered body disciple had a mentor, then their status would be higher than those ordinary lower base disciples. And those elite disciple were selected from the best lower base disciples. As for the core disciples, they were treated as the hope of the next generation of the Sky Tower School and thus cultivated accordingly. The awe-inspiring disciple hierarchy, though it seems unreasonable, it can stimulate the younger generation into the fierce sense of competition, which is the foundation of the brutal tower regime. This is the main reason why Kaiyang fought countless people. Another rule of Sky Tower, the challenge rule. In the school there was one rule. All Sky Tower disciples were allowed to be challenged once every 5 days. Though they could at most be 3 levels higher, or they were allowed to decline. The winner then be able to gain contribution points, while the loser will have points deducted. Contribution points are also known as main gate contribution points. In the Sky Tower, contribution points are equivalent to money. If you have enough contribution points, you could exchange them for anything you want, cheats, weapons from the main gate logistics department. Points can also be exchanged for gold and silver, but generally speaking these contributions were hard-won, and the disciples were generally reluctant to exchange it for that. There were also many different ways to obtain these points. You can exchange them through the treasure hunt, completing tasks, etc. The most common way to earn contribution points was to challenge others. The duels were to test their strength against other disciples, and if they won they earned contribution points. So early in the morning and many people crowded around Kaiyang. It was like staring a ripe persimmon about to fall. Kaiyang's name in the school could be considered famous. Not only because he carried the identity of a trial disciple, but also because he was still in Sky Terrace. Also, every time someone challenged him, he lost. Kaiyang naturally remembered what the commotion was. Today is the 5th day from the last challenge. They who didn't challenge him previously could now. Who isn't jealous? It was basically free contribution points. Although the points gained were not large, it was still enticing, thus many people still came. In position, Kaiyang shouted out 2 words, "Please instruct." That being said, anyone knew that Kaiyang was in for another beating. Kaiyang was always the first to attack. Even with his thin body he would always put out an amazing fight, taking the step to Zhou Dingjun, then punch to the chest. Afterwards a simple and direct attack, then a tiger fist. His attacks were strong and it felt like all of his energy were in his attacks. In the school, all disciples had to learn the Shaolin fist. This fist was well known. A basic move to keep disciples in shape and start them off. Zhou Dingjun didn't panic, because he was stronger than his opponent by 2 levels. Sadly, this battle didn't hold any suspense. Kaiyang's fist was seen coming and easily dodged by that burly body. Grazing past his clothes, Zhou Ding was unharmed. Punching again, Yang was easily countered and hit in his solar plexus. Suppressing the pain, Yang quickly retreated and avoided Zhou Ding's third strike. This surprised Zhou Ding. He hadn't thought that his third-stage brother could actually react fast enough. With this, his future plans were disrupted. But this small error didn't affect the situation. Thinking quickly, Zhou Ding took to the occasion to catch Yang unaware. Unaware, Yang suddenly kicked his right foot forward. Seeing the shadow rapidly approaching, Zhou Ding saw his indomitable spirit whilst executing a Shaolin fist. Crap! The heart jumped. Although he had higher cultivation, he was inferior to Yang's battle experience. But what would it matter? Even if he couldn't dodge, he would take it head-on. 2 light chuckles were heard. Then Yang fell backwards, while Zhou Ding was still standing. If his opponent was at the same cultivation as him, he would have been the one to fall down. Others couldn't see the fists, but they clearly felt it. This disciple was too fast, so in other words he first hit himself then the opponent. But it was only his fist that was powerful. This body and health were all too frail, skinny arms, legs and body. Malnutrition was very obvious, thus resulting in this ending. Senior, you let me win. This battle left quite a bitter result in Zhou Ding Jun's heart. Although he won, he didn't feel as if he had won. To the side, many whispers could be heard. This person thought he won? Haha. Doesn't that mean he didn't know of Yang's reputation and challenged him? This is really too hilarious. Zhou Ding furrowed his brow, for really didn't know of Yang's reputation. He had heard people talking about him. So today when he saw many people crowding around, he had decided to participate too and was super lucky to be chosen. Could you not win? His own fist made him go flying, thus making him at a supreme disadvantage. According to the gate rules, he had already lost. Again! After this thought, Yang yet stood up again and without the slightest hesitation but with even more intense spirit. Without waiting for answer, Yang charged over. 3 feet away, he swept his foot towards Zhou Ding's legs in an attempt to topple him. A leg whip. The school had disciples cultivate various martial arts. Yet Yang's application of them far surpassed his peers, even though he knew less techniques. So you could use a leg whip here. Then without notice, Yang went flying away again. With 2 realms apart, also the gap between physical fitness, Yang was once again defeated. His attack to Zhou Ding's leg had clearly wounded his own bones, making him falter slightly. Again, he said while clenching his teeth and eyes full of determination. Pong! Yang flew away again. Again. Pong! Yang flew away again. For those who couldn't watch any longer had left, while the ones who stayed marveled. Yang. This guy had real tenacity. No matter how many times he's beaten down, he just gets back up. He won't let it go. Hearing these words, Zhou Ding felt real bitter. He hadn't imagined that his opponent was such a crazy person. So Yang was sent flying another 7 or 8 times. His face was swollen, eyes were black, staggering around and breathing quite heavily. But he still continued to persist and continue fighting. Finally Zhou Ding exclaimed, "Are you crazy? Throw down the towel or you'll die." Within the tower disciples' internal struggles, every year there are many who die. Zhou Ding Jun, seeing this unflinching and courageous brother, couldn't help but feel a bit alarmed. When he thought that Zhou Ding Jun knew he couldn't reach such a degree and was afraid that he would have to surrender. Keep your cool, then you will not be afraid to be burned. This is the way of life, to stubbornly follow your decision. This is perseverance. Despite Yang's sorry figure, his eyes were becoming more and more powerful. Zhou Ding Jun knew that if he didn't settle things now, then there will be no end. Thinking of this, Zhou Ding Jun rushed forward to execute a palm knife to Yang's neck bone. Yang, with an imposing manner, swiftly escaped. Then his eyes clouded and he fell limply to the ground. Seeing this scene, tens of feet higher, a disciple who was sitting on a tree branch took out a small book. Flipping the page, she wrote, "Trial Disciple Yang versus Ordinary Disciple Zhou Ding Jun. Zhou Ding Jun wins." The person who was on the tree branch had a graceful figure. It obviously was a woman. It was just that black mask on her face. Didn't allow people to see her face. But those delicate eyebrows proved that this person was not old. The armband on her arm also indicated her identity. A Sky Tower Dark Hall disciple. Sky Tower's Dark Hall is a special sector. The school's 3 main elders were responsible for governing, and the hall disciples were responsible for recording down all affairs of the school. No matter how big or small, all matters are recorded. This also included the results of duels between disciples. So for all battles within the school, you do not have to worry about not being able to prove your wins and earning contribution points. For in the shadows, Dark Hall disciples will record them down for you and summarize your monthly records. This woman, after recording the outcome for this duel, took out another smaller book from her waist and opened up at May 7th century, 14 years Kai Yang's 147th defeat. Even if you remove this, above are numerous records of Kai Yang's battles. From the first battle to the most recent, all had one word: defeat. 147 battles in a row, he had lost every single one of them. This simply can be said that since the school's history, it was a unique record and was enough to be awe-inspiring. Though the owner of this record was lying on the ground, not knowing if they were dead or alive. Kai Yang had never challenged others, so these 147 losses were from others challenging him. So to say, from being challenged once every 5 days, this had lasted for 2 years. Looking at Kai Yang on the ground, she wrinkled her eyebrows. She didn't understand how Yang Kai could endure to this state. He had already become the tower's trial disciple. Even his very survival was endangered, so why did he still linger? If he had left, then his life will certainly be better. This thin boy, what kind of dedication did he have? Even with 147 straight losses, he remains undaunted. Perhaps this is a man's folly? Taking notice of Kai Yang was also a moment's coincidence. When Xianxia became a Dark Hall disciple, she was placed in charge of monitoring this area. Yang Kai was challenged every time, not once, not twice, and every single time she saw him being beaten to near death. Xianxia began to pay attention to this tempered body third-stage youth. She was really curious, with his strength, how long could he endure before finally leaving Sky Tower? This type of talent, this type of training speed, he really was not fit to remain here. The ordinary world is his place. The people below had already long scattered. Only Kai Yang was still there on the ground. Coming and going, time passed by. Xianxia disappeared from the branch in a flash. When Kai Yang woke up, it was already 3 o'clock. There was nowhere on his body that didn't hurt. Staggering, he stood up and looked up, only to be surprised. For the place in which he woke up from was under the shade of a tree and not where he fainted. This was really surprising. Was there a fellow disciple that was kind enough to carry him over? This had never happened before, causing Kai Yang to furrow his brows. He could vaguely remember there was a shadowy figure darting in front of him. But memory was too vague. Thinking harder just made it more unclear. But between his current position and the place he fainted, there was very distinct drag marks, clearly showing that he had been dragged over. Once again he felt his back. Immediately flaring hot pain spread out. Kai Yang froze for a moment, becoming furious. The trace of goodwill he felt towards his benefactor had quickly disappeared. That person directly dragged him over, otherwise how could his back bled like this? He might as just have left him there on the ground. Kai Yang thought to himself. Being depressed, Kai Yang realized that in his right hand he was clutching something. Looking down in doubt, he was surprised to find a small, fine work of porcelain in his hand. What is this? This was definitely not his, for the only things that Kai Yang owned were the clothes on his back and his broom. How could he have this? The small porcelain bottle had a label. Yang Kao read it out. Blood-clotting cream. Blood-clotting cream, Kai Yang knew of this. This was the school's cream to help heal wounds. Although it was ordinary, its effects were very good. Generally, disciples will carry 1 bottle around for emergency uses. This 1 bottle of cream in Sky Tower logistics was very expensive. 10 points of contribution was the bottle's cost. How much contribution points can Kai Yang earn for sweeping for a month? He can only earn 10 points, in other words, this 1 bottle's worth was equal to 1 month of work for him. Who was it? At this moment, the resentment Kai Yang had towards this person was reduced greatly, but as he moved, the pain flared up again. He had already come to this tower for 3 years. Within this time, Yang Kai had already gotten used to the lack of compassion between disciples. But today, for this person to leave behind a bottle of blood-clotting cream for him, greatly touched Yang Kai's hearts. Originally, he had thought all the disciples were cold-blooded people. Perhaps this bottle of cream was not worth much to them, but to Kai Yang currently, he desperately needed it. There was a saying, dripping water is grace, is hard to forget even when one's teeth fall out. Kai Yang was both grateful and tried to remember who it was. It was becoming harder to remember. He could only recall the thin strand of fragrance lingering around. Was this medicine this fragrant? Kai Yang pondered. Calming down and straightening his clothes, he carefully put the bottle away. Kai Yang re-picked up his broom and commenced his work. Inside and outside all were swept. Then at midnight, his work was considered completed. Kai Yang dragged his tired and hungry body back to his hut. The morning's battle wounds had yet to be treated. Even when Kai Yang was starving, he could only endure. First treat the injuries, then deal with the hunger. Taking off his clothes, he then carried over a tub of water to wash his body. If someone were to be by his side and look at Kai Yang's body, they would cry out in shock. Kai Yang's bones, along with his ribs, were all clearly visible. It was clear that his body didn't have much flesh on it and lacked nutrition. There were also bruises and scars littering his body everywhere. There was practically no place that wasn't scarred. Every 5 days he was challenged. Every time he lost. Every time he was knocked unconscious. When old injuries had yet to fade, new ones were added. Switching to any other person, they would be unable to tolerate this pain, but Kai Yang did. Not only did he bear with it, but he continued his daily sweeping, not letting those injuries affect him. Once his body was clean, Kai Yang picked up the bottle of blood-clotting cream and sniffed it a little. He found that the medicine was quite refreshing and lost himself in it, and then he shook his to clear it. Kai Yang opened that bottle and tried to smear the cream directly onto his injuries but stopped. He hastily went to fetch a new tub of water and then put some of the medicine into the water to dilute it. Stirring carefully, he began his treatment using the diluted formula. The effects of the blood-clotting cream were good. After diluting it, the effects were also reduced. But Kai Yang only had this one bottle, so naturally he would have to use it sparingly. After the tub of diluted was used up, Kai Yang had also finished treating his injuries. However, it also left him some doubts. For the paste smell was not the same as it was previously and also slightly spicy. Putting his clothes back on, he went to get the dark-colored sweet potato and wolfed it down. Kai Yang then plunked down on his bed and soon fell asleep. The holes in the small roof allowed some light to seep in, lighting up the hut. The hut was extremely sparse. There was no table or chairs. Only one small bed with a deerskin blanket and square-shaped pillow. This was all of Kai Yang's possessions. The deerskin was from a deer Kai Yang hunted previously. Although it was not thick, it was still warm. While his pillow was from his time outside the school when he was hunting, he happened to pick up. Pillow was a square, a foot long and 3 fingers thick. It looked like stone, felt like one but didn't bear the weight a stone should. Kai Yang didn't know what it was, but used it as a pillow and didn't investigate further. This blackstone pillow had already been with Kai Yang for a year already, yet he still didn't know what it was. Nonetheless, it was a great pillow. Fast asleep, Kai Yang dreamt of today's battle. Time and time again he was hit flying away by Zhou Dingjun, and time again he would stand back up, persevering and continuing with a blood crest on his chest. As the dream continues, the blood crest became more and more powerful. Kai Yang's sleeping face was clenched up in pain, but you could see it was resolute. He only had one goal in his heart: to succeed. Even if he was ordered to cut off his foot or fry his body in flames, he would not cower in fear. The unconscious Kai Yang didn't take notice that the pillow below his head started to exclude a clouded light that corresponded with his moods. This light became more and more luminous. In the dream, Kai Yang continued with his early morning encounter with Zhou Dingjun, repeatedly getting knocked to the ground. At his 1000th time of getting knocked and getting back up, with his unwavering will suddenly broke through. He rushed mercilessly towards Zhou Dingjun, who immediately fell to the ground. Zhou Dingjun's figure then became hazy and morphed into his own figure. At this moment Kai Yang's mind calmed down, though it wasn't due to him beating his opponent, but he winning against himself. Winning against his inner fear and yielding heart. A faint feeling gradually rose up. There is no longer anything under the sky that can make him submit to them. In reality, the black pillow under Kai Yang's head suddenly burst forth a black ray. This black ray emerged from the black stone and hovered in the air for a bit before drilling into Yang Kai's head, instantly disappearing from sight. At the same time, in an ancient and desolate place a strange presence descended. Like tidal waves, the collapse of snow, any person in front of him was insignificant, that strange presence thought. Kai Yang suddenly opened his eyes, his whole body sweating and bursting with fear. He was awoken by that strange presence. Calming himself, he forced a smile. When was dreaming, he could actually scare himself like that. It's ridiculous. Rubbing his face, he looked up into the night sky to determine the time, and was annoyed. He had only slept for 2 hours, seeing it was quite dark outside. Hurriedly he got up, folded up the deerskin blanket and repositioned the black stone pillow. As he got up, he frowned and turned to look back at the pillow. This feeling, his gut told him that it was not the same. Under doubts, Kai Yang reached out towards the pillow and picked it up. He was correct, its weight had decreased a lot. Strange. How can this block stone suddenly become so light? Questioning this, more questions started to appear. It was like a thick book was being thrown into the air, with the pages spread out as it landed. Kai Yang was flabbergasted, momentarily forgetting to catch it. The black stone pillow fell to the ground and opened up like a book. He couldn't believe it, even though it was spread out in front of him. Wasn't this a stone? How could it suddenly turn into a book? The black stone pillow had been with Kai Yang for over a year already. He was very clear. Did he not previously find a black stone and not a book? Did an old turtle take off his shell and become a snake? A while ago when he stooped down to pick up the book, and he immediately felt a connection with it. Looking at it again, he really had to admit it was the pillow he was using. This thick book left him speechless, though there were no words. It was empty, but the book's pages couldn't let him see through it. He gently tried to tear a page, but he couldn't tear it at all. It really makes him rethink. He had owned it for an entire year, and only just discovered its true colors. But such an empty black book, what is its use? He inspected the book all over, and still nothing. Mysterious. Kai Yang turned to the first page and nothing, staring at the blank book page. With little effort, he still found little change to the page. Then he discovered there was a little change to the page. The strange presence that appeared in the desolate place of his dream had appeared again. A line of golden-colored characters had started to appear. Blood is sighted. The golden body descends. Not a miracle, but a golden immortal. This penetrated deep into the soul, which caused Kai Yang to slam the book shut, with his limbs shaking uncontrollably. Breathing deeply, he managed to calm his heart down a bit. What secrets did this black book hide? He didn't know it all, but he knew that this object he obtained from Black Wind Mountains contains great history. After a long period of silence, he once again opened the black book. This time, he read the first line on the page. Turns out, it wasn't a dream. Gradually, other lines slowly appeared. Proud golden body. Rules the fence. Indomitable spirit. Will it descend? 8 lines and 32 words occupied an entire page, giving one a dominating heavenly and earthly feeling, as if those words were imbued with domineering spirit. These 32 words' meanings were very easy to understand. Naturally, Kai Yang understood. But the Black Book's history was unclear. Thus he was a bit afraid. What if this was a trap of some sort? Thinking of this, he laughed at himself, for currently he was only a trials disciple of Sky Towers. Who would go to the effort of taking care of him? From just looking at the last couple of lines and their meaning, the reason why the Blackstone pillow will turn into a black book was probably because of his dream tonight. For over 1 year, the pillow didn't change. Then suddenly after that dream it turned into a book. They must be connected. Is it because of his own change that also changed the Blackstone pillow? Since it was I who led to the book's birth, then this black book was born for me. Thus, I am this black book's owner. Thinking of this, Kai Yang hesitated no more. The writing clearly on the book clearly states that he must drip blood in order to lead. Thinking of this, he bit onto his finger hardly and dripped a drop of blood onto the page. Drip, drip. The blood went onto the page, but there was no apparent change. After a fair amount of time passed, from the page, black light started to emerge. His body immediately felt unwell, for the injuries from earlier today had started to sear in pain. His head had also started to hurt. Biting down on his teeth, he continued to endure. His blood continued to flow, and the light on the book was becoming brighter and brighter. After a large amount of time and effort, Kai Yang nearly fainted. But there had been substantial change to the book, and the black light had started to wiggle and contract. And from the center of the page, a tiny vortex had appeared. Following that, from within the vortex a golden swirl could be seen. Kai Yang put great effort to maintain a clear mind, staring intently to the transformation in front of him. Within the black vortex, a small, round, shiny, black object gradually came out. He was shocked, for there really was something in the book. Even though while he was dripping his blood, he had some expectations, he didn't think that was actually true. But right now, right in front of him, the 30 words from before were not false. Blood is sighted, the golden body descends. So what kind of golden body is it? Anticipation covered his pale face. After a while, after the shiny, round thing had fully appeared in front of him, he couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. No matter how rich his imagination was, he wouldn't have thought that the golden body would be like this. This thing was about 30 centimeters high golden skeleton, and to think the first thing that came out was the skeleton's skull. The golden skull just floated on top of the book page, sitting crossed-legged like it was mediating, every bone lighting up Kai Yang's tiny hut. The black vortex on the page slowly began to recede and everything reverted back to its tranquil state. Kai Yang had watched the strange golden skull appeared, for a time did not know how to react. On page said only how to get the golden body out, but didn't say what to do after it came out. Looking at it, he thought there wasn't something right. The golden skeleton in front of him had no eyes, but he felt like it looked like his own. It obviously didn't have any mouth but was clearly mocking its weakness. Thinking of this, Kai Yang was furious and went to pick it up. This small, insignificant skeleton dares to be arrogant. He didn't think that when he went to reach out for it, the golden skeleton flew out towards him, flying past his hand and embedded himself on his chest. This was a bit of a horror. With the skeleton smashing onto his chest, he cried out, and then the skeleton started to emit a fluorescent light and penetrated deep into the pores of Kai Yang's limbs. Suddenly, pain exploded all over his body, but the pain was not an ordinary pain, but the pain from the depths of the bone. He breathed in painfully, fell to the ground, his body bent like shrimp, with waves of cramps. His whole body's bones shattered in that moment, and he couldn't even lift a finger, for he had no strength. This was not an illusion. If you could see into his body, then you can see his bones being crushed, and next to each crushed bone, there was a layer of gold wrapped around, continuously repairing the broken bones, but far slower than the damage speed. When the repair was finished, it was crushed again. Human bones wrap around bone marrow and bone marrow nerve. Any small touch to them can bring great harm. One can only imagine his suffering at that moment. In his body, not a single bone wasn't shattered. Even for others, even if their strength of thousands of times higher than his, they would have probably fainted now. But with Kai Yang, he could only feel the pain 1,000-fold right now. Tragic cry came from the hut. Not far away, a fellow disciple was out for a walk, was frightened by the cry and quickly ran away. From somewhere, he received a message that came from this golden body. Destroy Kai Yang's consciousness and seize his body. Did Kai Yang agree? Even if he was unable to move, but also struggled to maintain the awareness, he will never let golden body take over the magpie nest. The golden body felt fear, So over and over again crushed Yang Kai's bones, tortured his nerves, so that he fainted thereon. One is a proud golden statue, another with an indomitable spirit, who wins who loses, one cannot see the outcome. Kai Yang knew that right now it was really important, unlike the previous challenges with his fellow disciples. If this was the past him, then he would have given up, but now he will not. Even if it hurts, like hell will endure. His consciousness, the golden body's destructive power, both commenced a hard tug of war. And the battlefield is the Kai Yang's body, you pull, I pull, each not letting an inch go. Over time, Kai Yang was surprised to find that the intolerable pain was slowly reducing, helped lift his spirits and fill him full of energy. It's no wonder, after Kai Yang and the golden body clashed time and time again, the numerous crushing of his bones had strengthened them. With his bones becoming stronger and stronger, and the golden body's powers becoming weaker and weaker, the pain thus naturally alleviated. The struggle will soon end. With the scales tipping in his favor, the unbearable pain slowly became bearable, transforming into light tickles, then becoming like splashes of cold water. This feeling was like applying cream, allowing his millions of pores to open and relax. Aware of the golden body's desperate struggle, made Kai Yang furious. Cursing loudly, he crushed that presence within him. Inside his body it had finally calmed down. A sigh could be heard, a sigh full of comfort and trace of great relief. After quietly lying on the ground for more than an hour, Kai Yang stood up, for he had just used up all his strength. An hour before, Kai Yang felt it was like a dream. He really could not believe this was true. Quietly he punched himself and felt the pain. In the end, what history does this black book have? He muttered to himself in helplessness. Waiting until his heart stopped beating, he suddenly found himself somewhat different from before. For he couldn't eat 3 fulfilling meals a day, and every 5 days he would suffer beatings. Thus his body bones are weak, but now he clearly perceived that his bones were full of vitality. A surge of energy, filled with warmth, slowly circulated inside and outside his body. Moving slightly, the bones burst out a crystal-clear sound, making it seem like a melody being played, and he who was hurt today couldn't feel the pain anymore. Aware of this, Kai Yang quickly rolled up his sleeves and opened his clothes. Looking closely, he found that his body no longer had any bruises and injuries. They had actually all disappeared, even those old wounds were healed. Feeling as unblemished as a newborn baby, rubbing the places that previously held wounds, dead skin fell. This revealed the new tender skin underneath, like a baby's but far more healthier. I cry. He swallowed down a cold lump, thinking of that golden skeleton in his body had such a strong recovery ability, then feeling his own strength and found that he was still at the tempered body 3rd stage with no change. This discovery somewhat made him a little disappointed. Rivers and illusions with secrets known only to insiders, this type of story Kai Yang heard much during his childhood. He knew in world there are many men eligible to jump past the Dragon Gate, becoming powerful and famous. But after all, it's just a story. How many people can really be happy and gain such luck and results in this world? Those senior experts with greater strength, the more I could not bear to lower themselves with earth and buried. Always finding inheritor before death. I want to jump off a cliff, drill a cave, and encounter events. Such unlikely things will happen? But the current problem had happened to him. That black must have great background, and that old golden skeleton must be extraordinary. This can be said as his good fortune. Could also be said as fate. The 4 sentences on the black book's first page. Proud golden body, rules the fence, indomitable spirit, will it descend? If he didn't pick up the black book, but another picked it up, they too will treat it was garbage. Unable to prise open like empty tie. Precisely because he picked it up and used it as a pillow for a year, it felt his body's unyielding and tough nature. Unlocking the secret black book today. In other words, this thing really is his first encounter, but it's the first achievement that he obtained through his own hands. Thought of this, Kai Yang sudden burst comfortable, is called the BMW with a good saddle, beauty gifts hero. That black book. Thinking of it suddenly, this book that was his pillow for over a year. He wasn't anxious to find out what it was nor how he found it. Between being anxious and somewhat weakened in the body, the black book abruptly appeared in front of Kai Yang and snapped shut, falling to the ground. He was stunned. Picking up the book, he furrowed his eyebrows while thinking hard. Struck by with an idea, a move from his hands, the book disappeared, and a further move made it appear again. This scene was like a magic trick. One could see that Kai Yang's face was very solemn, because he truly felt that the black book could escape into his body with a single thought. This black book possibly be made from a soul stone. After saying it, he nearly gave himself a fright. A soul stone. This was considered a legendary gem. Only when hundreds of millions of ghosts gather in the abyss and with the help of vast amounts of human vitality will it start to form. Rumor has it that this is how it was formed. Inside the black stone, with misery of 100 million lives, the living cannot enter, and green grass can't think to grow. Those words were somewhat exaggerated. But for a soul stone about 3.5 centimeters x 3.5 centimeters to form, how many lives must be taken? The formation of this mythical rock was really cruel and bloody. What every life near it during its creation will be dead within milliseconds. Also, the formation time is unimaginable. It could that up to a millennium or even 10 millenniums. Putting the formation process aside, this soul stone can be considered a supreme treasure. That is because it has a very unique ability, for it can be melded with one's body and also open up a dimension. This space is quite flexible, storing things will be no hassle. Even though Kai Yang is only a trial disciple, a humble position, his experiences were not lacking. Not to mention, the story of the legendary soulstone has been around more many years. Anyone would know the story. When he just obtained this black book, he didn't think about this. Thinking about how the books went into his body, he thought about how the golden skeleton came out from the book. How could he not recognize the book's material? He immediately started sweating. Soulstones were the things of legends, long extinct in the world. He didn't think that he will be able to encounter one, let alone such a large one. The legends only talked about 3.5 centimeters x 3.5 centimeters size soulstones, for it was only found that large. Even at that size, it was priceless. But the only in front of him was somehow made into a black book that was 30 by 7 centimeters. Its value was immeasurable. If this news were to spread out, even if it's the entire Han dynasty, not mention a mere martial school, they will probably be crushed overnight to obtain it. Kai Yang couldn't help but feel his hands heat up. This heart had not forgotten the terror, but luckily it could be taken into his body. Otherwise he would be in great danger. His body hiding this treasure, he swiftly escaped back into his hut. He dared not to be carelessly, while his heart beat madly. He was becoming more and more excited, whilst also becoming more and more uneasy. Hi's strength was currently too low, so how could he guard this treasure? Even though the black book could be taken into his body, eliminating chances of being discovered, this didn't lessen the worry in his heart. Only practice, only the strong will be able to protect what is theirs. Thinking about what happened 3 years ago, Kai Yang's eyes gradually calmed down. All on his, without any support, he came to this school. What is not for practice and strength? Even though he obtained this book, he took it into his hands. On the first page was the proud golden body. Even though he didn't know what use it had, it couldn't be useless. This book also had so many pages, it couldn't only possess this one golden body. Although Kai Yang is only 15 this year, due to his experiences these past 3 years, he is far more mature than his peers. It is also because of this that he forged this unyielding character. So when he calmed down, sitting on his bed, he carefully started to read the first page. After confirming there were no extra things popping out of the first page, he started to read the second page. With his previous experiences, his actions seemed more natural and knowledgeable. And then Kai Yang's eyes slowly widened as golden words emerged on the dark pages. Proud golden body. Tempered body record. Previously his mood had dropped, but now it soared. Sure enough, as he suspected, every page had something hidden almost without thinking. Kai Yang's entire mind was focused on the second page of the book. Abruptly, The golden characters flew off the pages like a fish and swiftly drilled themselves in Kai Yang's brain. The glow enveloped the darkness around him and then disappeared. After it was gone, he felt as if his brain had gained new information. This had all come from the golden characters. Calming his heart, Kai Yang closed his eyes and began to digest the information. In fact, he didn't need to digest and absorb the information. For when the characters imprinted themselves into his brain, he was already able to comprehend their meaning with ease. A full mastery in another sense. This is the tempered body record. Yang Kai muttered, for he found that it was a fist technique. Though it may seem simple, in reality it was not. In order to perform it, there were strict requirements. For it is extremely profound. In order to cultivate it, you must be facing the rising sun in the east to learn it. So at most, you could only practice for half an hour a day. Currently it was night, so he had to wait at least 5-6 hours to start. This frustrated Kai Yang, for he had exerted himself all day and only ate one measly sweet potato. Nonetheless, he had obtained a priceless treasure, and was jubilant. After trying to sleep for half an hour, he decided to analyze the 3rd page of the Black Book. But it just let him down. No matter how much he checked and flipped, there were no changes to the page. While doing this, he fell asleep. When Yang Kai then woke up, it was nearly sunrise. The pre-dawn darkness was clouded and stillness covered the whole area, with the occasional insect and bird noises. With his heart looking forward to what was going to happen, Kai Yang quickly leapt out of bed and went to the front of the cabin. Standing there, he took a few deep breaths and let his body slowly relax. Oriental, a touch of gray dawn appeared. Then he opened his eyes. The set of instructions on the fist technique was practiced hundreds of times. His hands shaped into a palm, with a gentle, slow movement pushing to the left, to the right, pushing forward. Embracing the world in his mind, everything in between the palm, the vast land, even the air covering the moon and stars. Left foot forward, right next to the horizon, the right foot stepped powerfully like the king of the underworld. Between breaths, the world was full of vitality, like spring flowers blooming. The autumn wind blew, like a golden message. Then the cold wind whistled by, signaling the coming of snow, ice, cold snow. Yang Kai's look gradually deepened. Slowly his fists pressed on the hefty rocks. In any case, the rock didn't hint at opening anytime soon. With a burst of sound, Kai Yang, with a pale face, suddenly staggered, nearly fell to his knees. While exercising countless times in his mind, he discovered that this art was an absolute fist. Kai Yang never expected this record actually contained such mysterious quenching body technique. For just that short while, Kai Yang felt that the entire world was weighing on his shoulders. But he also felt that he could sense all things in the world under this pressure. This quenching body record was not the practice of fist techniques. It was the practice of worldly transformation and the fate of the world. This practice was full of ups and downs, joys and sorrows. A slow punch and kick in could affect the power of heaven and earth, but also was full of secret rules. When he launched to 6 palms, it took 3 steps. This result wasn't even 1% of the result recorded in the book. Just that had been difficult to sustain. Then a crack emitted from his spine, making him believe that he broke his spine. He quickly inspected it, but only found that his back was in some pain. It wasn't anything big. Stealing his mind, Kai Yang once again started to practice according to the tempered body record. Because he wasn't psychologically prepared, Kai Yang's mind was in a trance. Feeling unclear, he held his breath to regain a clear mind. Accompanied by a slow dance of his fists, Kai Yang once again felt his mind had become clear and regained the atmosphere required to continue. Then his body emitted several indistinct feelings. Kai Yang was uncertain as to what they were. Not only that, with the routine deployment, his fist was actually heavier, like being at the bottom of the ocean. With more hardships, there were more improvements. Caca sounds could be heard. Kai Yang's every action made his bones explode like firecrackers. Excruciating pain permeated throughout his body, but he was unmoved. His tenacity at this moment vividly appeared. In the blink of an eye, Kai Yang felt his hands and feet tremble like they were beaten to pulp. It was like heaven and earth both imposed themselves on his body. Persisting, he didn't falter. Suddenly a warmth surged, alleviating the pain within his body in this moment. Spirits lifted, he restarted practice. He knew that this must have been due to the integration of the golden skeleton. After all, both of these things came from the same place. In front, the sun rising. Near a cabin in a remote place of the school stood a sweating young man, diligently practicing, slow fists and discovering his future. Half an hour passed when Kai Yang suddenly felt light. He no longer felt the heavy pressure on his body. Right at this moment, he could no longer continuing cultivating this skill. The record was very clear: you could only cultivate for half an hour every day at sunrise. His effort seemed to have drained him. Thus Kai Yang fell to the ground in a heap and took a deep breath. A surge of purple gas accompanied his breath and disappeared. In an instant he felt refreshed and energized. Looking distracted, he couldn't help but be shocked. Atmosphere sense. He had already developed a sense to the atmosphere. That is to say, he had broken through the tempered body third stage and was entering the fourth stage. This news made him elated. Since entering Sky Tower, it took 3 years of practicing to reach the third stage. But after 30 minutes of practicing, the mysterious quenching body technique had let him break through and enter the fourth stage. The tempered body had 9 stages. Until the third stage, it really just enhanced one's physical capabilities. But after the fourth stage, it would generate a presence within the meridians. Only with the birth of atmosphere sense are you considered a true cultivator. Although at this time you will have the atmosphere sense, the body will still have no real strength. You could only wait for the 7th stage, where the body will develop its own strength all the way until the 9th stage. That is when the body breaks through and opens, creates a door to strength to the Kai Yuan boundary. Only then will you truly have strength. Kai Yuan boundary is a true warrior's start. Everything in the tempered body territory was laying the foundations for the future of the Kai Yuan boundary. This foundation was not finalized, like with a man's strength. For your bones, skin would grow continuously until you reach the peak. Kai Yang had just having entered the 4th stage and obtained atmosphere sense. To outsiders, this may not seem like much, but to him it was great news and progress. Half an hour after he broke through, the results of quenching body record were evident. Although his own knowledge contributed, if not for that technique, he believed that he needed another 3-4 months before advancing. With this, he breathed in deeply and exhaled out the impurities in his body. From within his mouth, out came a pitch-black smoke. Filthy, as it tumbled to the ground. After expectorating this smoke out, his 6 senses all became more acute and sharpened. Was this his body's impurity? Kai Yang shook on the spot. With the practice of cultivation you will reduce and drain the body of impurities each time. Kai Yang previously had experienced this, but never at this level. Numerous ideas and joy lingered in his mind. Although he had successfully entered the 4th layer, he had made no real progress in the tempered body record's fist technique. His daily practice could only produce 1% of the total result, out of the 101 punches. Hasty men don't eat hot tofu, and with a hasty heart, you won't be able to feel a hot butt. Thinking for a while, Kai Yang planned a bit of his future. Even though it wasn't thorough, he could no longer be like how he had been, taking each step as it came. For after a while, you couldn't help but become impatient. Then, after eating something, he continued to sweep the area. Although he was a sweeper, it didn't mean that he needed to sweep the entire school. He was only responsible for 1/10 of the school. Even though it was cumbersome, it would only take an hour or so. Within the trees, Xianxia had started to monitor the disciples and inadvertently saw Kai Yang sweeping away. To not have some emotions would be weird. Today there was something different about him, but she wasn't sure. For over half an hour, he hadn't left that spot, sweeping it until it was shiny and spotless. It was so slick that if a mosquito were to go on, it would have a sprained ankle. This guy! Xianxia didn't know what to do with him. At that moment, Kai Yang was thinking about other things. Yesterday he had obtained a huge opportunity, so naturally he was considering his future. But no real options were found. He could only continue to practice at sunrise every day, for now. While he was pondering, rapid footsteps approached quickly from behind. He quickly went to dodge, but didn't realize that the other party was making preparations to avoid him too, so they crashed into each other. Though he didn't sustain any major injuries when he crashed into that person, it felt as if he had crashed into a steel wall. With a cry, he fell to the ground and the place he bumped felt numb. Kai Yang quickly recovered and apologetically asked, "This fellow disciple, are you okay?" The young man was annoyed, and when he looked up to see that it was Kai Yang, that explosive anger dissipated. Holding anger for such person held no meaning, and it was also his own fault. Replying immediately while waving his hands, "It's all right, it's all right." While saying this and getting up, he then energetically ran away. Kai Yang asked, "Fellow disciple, where are you going to hurriedly?" The young man faintly shouted, "The contribution hall. Where else?" Listening to his words, Kai Yang realized that today was already the 8th day of the month. It was the day where the main gate distributed last month's contribution points. So every month of this day, the logistics department would be crowded with disciples flocking to collect their points. With these points, they could exchange them for various cultivation pills, treasures, and martial arts to improve their strength. So this day made all disciples all excited. Some were excited while others disappointed. Kai Yang was of the latter. Startled, he couldn't help but frown. Each month, the amount of points he received was quite meager. Sweepers could earn 10 points, but in the last month he was challenged 6 times, and each time he lost. With reductions after each loss, he was only left with 4 points. This really made people cry. Fortunately, he was only a trial disciple. His status was the lowest, so if he lost, he would only lose 1 point. Normal disciples lost 2. Thinking of this, Kai Yang was thankful. But even a small mosquito has flesh, and with his savings, he will one day earn enough to exchange them for something worthwhile. There had been enough delay today, he thought as he continued to sweep. When he had finally finished the job, it was noon. Time to go to the hall to collect his points. After the morning's bustle, the hall was now deserted and quiet. Thankfully, he hadn't came in the morning, or the wait would have been too troublesome. Waltzing into the hall, you could clearly see an old man dozing away. This old man was the treasurer of the school. He was about 50 with thin white hair and a kind face. Looking at him, he looked harmless to animals and humans. But Kai Yang knew he was a sly fox. There was once an elite disciple who dared to act arrogant here and was then pushed out of the hall a few hundred feet. His life was almost taken. Kai Yang was present, so he knew this and also knew that his old man held unfathomable strength. Stepping into the view of the old man, Kai Yang could clearly see the old man snoring away. This old thing. Don't know which female Sky Tower disciple he is dreaming about again. Holding a broom, he gently nudged the old man while softly calling, "Treasurer Meng." The old man's surname was Meng. His first name Kai Yang didn't know, so he couldn't call him that. Tapping the counter a few times, the old man was finally awoken. He groggily opened up his eyes and saw that it was Kai Yang, wrinkling his face as if he saw shit. "What's with that face?" Kai Yang asked indignantly, rolling his eyes. "Why didn't you come in the morning?" Confidently he replied, "There were too many people in the morning, and currently it's peaceful." Interrupting this old man's rest. "Do you know what respecting the elderly means?" Leaning in, Kai Yang whispered, "Which young lady did you dream of?" Suddenly full of energy, Treasurer Meng replied to Kai Yang with eyes full of contempt and loudly proclaimed, "Your words just now tarnished this old man's reputation. Too outrageous. Good body figure? Great." Treasurer Meng unconsciously leaked out. "Supple legs, white skin, and a beautiful, thin waist? N. Immediately he nodded his head, immediately thinking Kai Yang as a friend. He. Kai Yang sneered. Treasurer Meng stammered and blushed as bright as a monkey's ass. Full of shame, he just wanted to dig a hole and crawl inside to hide. Throughout his years at Sky Tower, the only person Kai Yang really knew was Treasurer Meng. After all, he needed to go to him every month. Treasurer Meng had a nickname which most people referred to him as bully Meng. Even though his position is a treasurer, he still liked to extort contribution points from other disciples. Take blood-clotting cream for example, usually it would be sold around 10 contribution points. He will sell 2 bottles for the price of 3. Also, the amount of cream that should go in 2 bottles was put into 3. It's very simple, he said. Buy it or get lost. Of course, Treasurer Meng doesn't always do it, only occasionally. He only targets richer disciples. For poor people like Kai Yang, he doesn't even bother. Contribution points are hard to come by, so how can disciples stand by and be exploited? Every disciple that had been cheated by him would report him to the council. They have warned him numerous times, but he still continued, unmoved. Furthermore, his position is crucial, and there was no one who could replace him. Due to this, all of the school's disciples hated him to the utmost limit. That old man was ruthless to everybody, except Kai Yang, to whom he could do nothing. That was because one time, he was peeking at a female disciple, and was caught red-handed by him. No respect for the elderly. What a scandal! He was caught, so Treasurer Meng could only lower his head in front of Kai Yang. It was exactly because of this that Kai Yang became very familiar with the old man. The lecherous old man, with thick skin, quickly adjusted his attitude and said, "Same as always?" "Yeah," Kai Yang said earnestly while nodding his head. Not saying a word, Treasurer Meng took out 10 silvers from within the counter and recorded it down. Taking the silvers, he asked, "How many contribution points do I have now?" Rolling his eyes, the treasurer replied, "You earn 4 points each month and then use 1 point to exchange for 10 silvers. That leaves you with only 3 points to save, making a total of 12 points in your account. What, you want to exchange them for a bottle of blood-clotting cream?" "No, I was just asking," he replied while muttering, 12 Such a small amount, even if you just wanted to exchange it for a small medicinal herb, it wouldn't even be enough." With a serious face, Treasurer Meng whispered to him, "Little Kai Yang, you want to save up and exchange it for a tempered essence pellet, but to save up for it and then to rank up with your speed, how long will that take?" "Won't I eventually reach it?" he replied, chuckling. This left Treasurer Meng speechless. He thought that with his speed, by the time he makes it, this old man will have already been dead for many years. "But Treasurer Meng, there is one thing I don't understand." "Speak," the old man said while putting on a "I am in a good mood so I will tell you" attitude. "The tempered essence pellet is a very precious medicine. How could it appear here?" He. Speaking with a proud face. "That is because this pellet is this old man's treasure. Others don't know about it." "Ah, it's yours." This left Kai Yang stunned. He had always thought that this pellet belonged to the school. No wonder this old thing set such an astronomical price. "Now don't be angry," he joyfully said while taking a drink from the teapot. "I won't bully you as long as you bring enough contribution points to exchange. Old Meng will give it to you. For my word is not nothing. I will collect it," he said, nodding. With his face downcast, old Meng asked Kai Yang, "I heard that yesterday you got a beating?" Immediately Kai Yang turned around and left. From behind, Treasurer Meng shouted, "Let this old man ask. Don't be in such a hurry to walk away," he said, but really he was gloating inside. Seeing that Kai Yang had no intention to stop, he straightened up and yelled, "Little Kai Yang, you should hurry up and leave. Sky Tower is no place for you to be. Sooner rather than later you will be killed." Pausing but without turning around, Kai Yang sighed. "I have no place to return to." He was finished if he left. After holding the teapot for a while, Treasurer Meng said, "Then why did you come? Tempered essence pellet?" This expensive treasure, how could this old man possibly own it? He only made up this lie to give you hope. He had never thought you would take it seriously." Kai Yang then hurriedly went back to his hut and put the broom away, then briskly walked out. He was going to the small village outside of Tanglin to buy his food with his 10 slivers, like he did every month. For the first time, this trip didn't make him feel tired. Previously, every time he walked down this path, he would get bad asthma attacks again and again. But this time, not only did this not happen, his body felt strengthened compared to before, felt less strained walking down the path. Even if he walked 100 miles, he felt that he wouldn't tire. Is it the golden skeleton? This made him think of something that happened this morning. While he was sweeping, another disciple had crashed into him, but on the contrary to what normally occurred, he had held his ground very stably, while the disciple had fell to the ground. Although this wasn't much, in retrospect it was unusual. With his weak physique, how could he not have fallen, but the other party fell? It had always been him who fell. Growing more and more excited, he thought about the changes the golden skeleton had brought to his body. Although these changes were small, gradually over the course of time they could culminate into great changes. Thinking of this, Kai Yang recovered and soon walked to town. Looking around, he went to the left-hand side of the street. He was going to a rice shop. The shop wasn't big and the owner is surnamed He, and was a local resident. He treated all customers the same. This was one of the reasons why Kai Yang bought from him. Such a small store could be found everywhere. The reason why Black Plum Village was very busy was because in the surrounding area, apart them there was not only Sky Tower School but also the Windy Rain Sect. The relationship between the two could not be considered bad. The various other small schools couldn't compare to these two main sects, for they didn't even own their own land. It was precisely because of these two main sects that the village was able to sell many different weapons and maintain such a bustling environment full of many different wares, creating an environment just like the Han Dynasty's capital. After walking around for a while, Kai Yang inadvertently walked past an alley where some people were gathered. He didn't know what they were doing, but they were pretty suspicious and gave Kai Yang an extremely vicious glare. Chuckling lightly, he just followed the principle. If they don't harm me, I won't harm them. He just ignored them. But among those three, there was one who dressed in a similar fashion to Kai Yang. Kai Yang didn't think much of this though, because they were in Black Plum Village, located close to Sky Tower. Other disciples coming down to the village was quite common. A little while ago, Kai Yang arrived at the line for rice. The line was quite long, the length of 2 stalls. The business was very prosperous, but only has one waiter running around serving. The boss was calculating about money on an abacus at the counter, while the wife greeted the guests. As more people finished ordering, the line gradually became shorter and Kai Yang joined the line. "Madam," Kai Yang cried out. A 40-year-old looking lady looked up to see who it was. When she saw it was Kai Yang, she suddenly smiled and said, "Ah, young man, you came to buy rice again." "Yes." He walked to the front of the counter and pointed a bag behind the counter and said, "Give me 1 bag, please." While the lady was tying up the bag with a string, she said, "Young man, you buy just 1 bag a month? Is this enough for you?" Kai Yang replied, "It's enough. You're lying," the lady retorted while looking at Kai Yang. "Look at you. Such thin arms and legs. If you're eating properly, then what's with the skinny arms and legs?" Yang Kai smiled sheepishly. "I also go to the mountains to hunt, so therefore even with just 1 bag I won't be hungry." While the boss concentrated on calculating the bill, he whispered to her, "Go fetch the old rice from the back and give it to this child. We'll listen to the boss." Madam replied with a smile, "How is this right? You are also trying to make a living here." Yang Kai said out loudly. The lady immediately frowned her face. "What use is old rice? Leaving it there will only provide a place for insects to grow. Anyways, people won't eat it. But the owner said that this rice still has some nutrients, although less. You wait here, I will go get some for you take home." As she was saying this, she had already started walking towards the back room. Kai Yang's heart swelled, for he didn't know what to say. Every time he came to buy rice, the boss and his wife would always find various excuses to give him more. They say that insects will grow in old rice and the like, but in fact it was always good rice they gave him, not old rice. Their generosity gave Kai Yang hope in this sad world. "Thank you, Uncle He." Yang Kai's voice had a slight trembling to it. The boss smiled and looked up. "When living alone, don't you have household problems? In the future, whenever you're hungry, just come to our shop. We may not have much, but we still have enough rice for you to eat." "Okay." Yang Kai nodded his head. This world still had good people around. Shortly, 2 enthusiastic people came to the rice store and kicked some people who were ready to order their meals from the line and away from the storefront. "Oh!" The second little brother fell, landed on his butt, and flipped over. It was a big problem because after he fell to the ground he couldn't get up again. "Why? Boss," he called towards the people who had kicked the little brother as he ran out from behind the counter and towards the two men. Kai Yang quickly helped second little brother up whilst intently glaring at the two evil-faced men. One of the men, looked pale and thin, was clutching his stomach, while the other one was built like a bear, supported the pale one. These two were the ones who kicked the second brother. "Who's the boss here?" the man people shouted out. I am, boss," he quickly replied. He was only an ordinary merchant, yet the two men who called him out had such fierce-looking faces. The swords at their waist and the fierce faces that showed they were not easily trifled with. "Boss," he wondered what had happened. Well, so you are the black-hearted boss. You even dared to sell poisonous rice to my brother. Look at him. Originally he was a strong man, but after eating your rice he became this sickly. Normally he is as strong as a bear, but he can hardly stand now. You black-hearted person, worrying only about money and going as far as to take lives." At this outburst from the man, boss, he worriedly stammered out, How could this be? How could it?" The man then said, "How would I know? This morning my brother bought some rice from you and made rice porridge. Then he became like this after eating the rice he bought from you. I was lucky I didn't eat any. Otherwise I also would have become like him." Bossy's forehead began to sweat. He took his sleeves and kept wiping his forehead and said, "Respected customer, I fear there might be a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding? Misunderstanding your mother. If it wasn't your rice, then what caused him to become like this?" the Han man roared. Kai Yang sat down and pondered the situation while all eyes were on the commotion. "Boss, he is such a nice person." Kai Yang couldn't believe that this person who gave him rice would put poison in it. Not to mention the fact, boss, he couldn't possibly have a black heart in Kai Yang's mind. A black-hearted businessman wouldn't be so stupid as to poison his own rice. If these information spread, how would he do business in the future? Who would dare come and buy his rice? The two men's poor excuses were really unbearable, and they couldn't even consider that it was something else. Therefore, these two are definitely here to ruin others. But this move was a bit too evil, for they implied that the boss needed someone to die just to earn some money. Even though Kai Yang's body was weak, he was still a practitioner. And through these past years he had seen countless types of people, so he felt he could accurately judge boss he. The man was also someone who he owed greatly, and when Kai Yang witnessed this, it caused his face to fall. He stood up and said, "These two." "What?" One of the men threw him a glare, his anger evident. Kai Yang didn't speak, but boss, he immediately sprang in front of him. He slowly shook his head for Kai Yang to stop. "Uncle, he." Kai Yang was stunned. "Even in bankruptcy, avoid misfortunes." "Boss," he whispered. Kai Yang just helplessly sighed. That fact that the boss said this signaled that he knew what the two Han men were on about. But in order to do business, one must have a good name. The earlier commotion had already attracted a lot of attention. If this continued, then the rice stand's reputation would go down the drain. Even if one knew what they said was false, one could only comply with them and hurriedly hope to end this fiasco before too much damage was done. In desperation, boss, he faced the man. "Regarding your brother's illness, I can say that it has nothing to do with me." After the two men heard this, one cried out in anger. "Even if it's not related, I have already come to this rice stand. If I don't make the truth clear, then my brother's suffering would be in vain. He should be sent to the doctor immediately. But of course, if you are willing to shoulder the medical bills, then we are willing to drop the subject." After this statement, it was clear that you really needed to go bankrupt to avoid misfortunes. If people really wanted to extort money, they would do it over a period of time. The demands that these two men were making were too short-sighted. If boss he agreed to pay them off now, his rice stand's reputation would still suffer. For nothing is watertight, and news of him selling poison rice would spread. This told Kai Yang that the men were either not interested in extorting boss he for more money or that they had some other goal. Who would have imagined that these two Han men had not intention of compromising? "You black-hearted boss. Who do think we two brothers are to be exploited by you so freely? We two brothers were really unlucky to have bought poisoned rice from you. Where is your guilty conscience? That statement resonated quite deeply with Kai Yang. He curled his lip while sitting, thinking were they virtuous and living life a clear conscience? Boss, he was also stupefied. What? Weren't these two men here to extort money? While stunned and unsure what to do, more and more people had started to gather. A handsome boy similar to Kai Yang's age had also appeared. From his looks, he was clearly far better off than Kai Yang. That young man casually walked up to the men and circled them with interest. Whilst doing so, he constantly clicked his tongue. Others may have not noticed, but with a glance Kai Yang recognized those three as the people he spotted earlier in the alley. The crowd just stared at the boy, who had just appeared. Weren't these three men together? Kai Yang sensed an evil plot in the air. Suddenly the Sky Tower disciple walked out to the crowd and circled around. His expression slowly turned to one of mockery and arrogance. But the two Han men were not easily mocked and creased their faces. You little brat, walking around in circles has made this uncle dizzy. Do you want be the same? The youngster just snickered. Standing in front of the two men, watching the poisoned man, he said, "Your face is very pale. Looks like your poisoning isn't simple." "Of course it's not," he viciously responded. "If it were not, why would I be here and with my brother instead of at the doctor's? We're here to reveal this boss Black Heart and his true colors, hoping that no one will buy from his store again and suffer as we have." This made boss his face pale, for he didn't know what the aim of these two men was. If it were extorting money, then he would understand, but their motives were very puzzling and unclear. Just when he was pondering this, Kai Yang softly inquired, "Uncle He, did you offend anybody during this time?" Thinking hard, boss, he miserably wailed, "No one." Then could it be that your rice shop prevented someone from earning money? Even though Kai Yang was young, he had experienced many things, so this thought was not impossible. This is just a humble job to survive. How could I prevent others from their income? Now this was weird. Staring at the ground, Kai Yang thought hard, but was still confused. Then the Sky Tower disciple sneered and asked the two men a question. They shouted out, "Look, trickery!" While shouting, the man resorted to a trick to open the black heart of the poisonous apple. This surprised people around, for the morning had been quite sluggish. The Han man was wildly hopping about, while his fists were clenched. Jumping, he went to expose the poisonous truth. Moving like this, his once pale face became flushed and rosy. This caused the crowd to gasp. Clearly they were shocked over this sudden change. Poisoned. Looking at the two Han men, he sarcastically said, "Such skill. I respect them, respect." The two men couldn't help but pale. Not only did the fallen man not turn white, he also looked like he wasn't poisoned. The surrounding people also started to boo. They weren't stupid. How could they not be able to understand the situation? They didn't know what motives these men had. But to slander boss his rice stand was shameful. Luckily, that Sky Tower disciple had uncovered the truth. More and more people had started to despise the men and started to praise that young man. This young man was naturally easy to like, and with this incident, his reputation skyrocketed. While Kai Yang secretly confirmed his suspicions that they were all acting. They were acting out the play of an honorable knight, uncovering foul play and protecting the weak, in order to gain reputation. If he hadn't seen them together earlier in the alley, he was afraid he would have also believed them. But why did they go to all that effort? The two Han men could no longer keep up the accusations. Staring fiercely at the young man, they asked, "Brat, who are you to interfere in my brother's issues?" Gracefully he turned around and arrogantly replied, "I am Sky Tower's Sumu." Hearing those words, one of the men became afraid. "No wonder. You are a Sky Tower disciple, a dragon within here. Today these two brothers have admitted defeat. If fate allows it, I hope we will meet again." This sentence felt like it was planned beforehand, making Kai Yang laugh. Sumu just laughed coldly. "Leave safely, for I won't escort you." With the situation like this, and if it were indeed no accident like Kai Yang suspected, Then the two men would leave and Su Mu would then seek out the audience's praise, especially Boss He's. But Kai Yang didn't want Boss He to be fooled. Before those two men left, he quickly said, "You can't let them go, they are too despicable. Today's victim was his rice stand, but if we don't teach them a lesson, they may target Lu Shi's clothes shop or Jiang Shi's grocery." Most of people who heard this couldn't help but notice that what he said was correct. How could they let these despicable villains leave so easily? If they let them go today, then tomorrow they might target another shop and leave them destroyed. If it came to that, then they may not be as lucky as Boss He. Thinking of this, the people started to block off the path in front of the two Han men. From his position, Kai Yang could clearly see the panic in Su Mu's eyes. This in turn leads Su Mu to source of the voice to Kai Yang. While the two men exchanged glances and quickly readjusted their expressions. Chuckling, Kai Yang added, "Fellow disciple, there is a saying that goes, good people follow through to the end. Just like how Buddha went to the West, why don't you and I both arrest these two criminals?" Seeing Kai Yang's thin and fragile physique, Su Mu couldn't help but burst out in annoyance. "Who's your fellow disciple?" Kai Yang replied, "I am also a Sky Tower disciple. I entered the main gate 3 years ago." This made Su Mu speechless, for he really was a fellow disciple. Now, without further ado, Kai Yang came forward and said, "Throughout the land, it is important to be reasonable, while one must also be chivalrous, so brother, you must not let only me take the benefit. Let both of us arrest these two cowardly men and help Boss He claim justice, while also helping Black Plum Village." With this statement, the surrounding people began to applaud. This filled Su Mu with anxiety, for he felt as if he was dragged upon a pirate's ship by this unknown brother. Even he wanted to escape, he couldn't. Those two men were also glancing continuously at Su Mu looking for guidance. Looking at them, Su Mu couldn't do anything for them. "Brother, let's go." Pulling on Su Mu's shoulder, Kai Yang rushed over. "What is this?" Su Mu was in tears, wondering where did this brother come from. This really ruined my plans. But it had already come to this point, so Su Mu could only charge over. While he was preparing to capture them, he was also signaling for them to look for an opportunity to escape. The two men nodded, but Kai Yang saw the exchange and guessed what they were doing. He was worried that Boss He would be tricked, so he took extra precaution and shouted, "Friends, fellow owners, don't just watch. Come help us two brothers." Hearing this, Boss He also went to help. The rice stand's youngsters joined in, their hands carrying empty rag bags. Boss He was previously abused by these two men, so naturally they would want revenge. Seeing that Boss He had acted, the crowd couldn't just watch and they all flocked towards the two men to capture them. Previously the two men weren't worried, but as they saw this scene, their faces paled. So they quickly yelled, "Don't hit the face!" While protecting their face, they curled up on the ground. Bang, 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 the sound of the beating rang out. Even though the businesses on this street were run by ordinary people, they currently displayed a powerful fighting spirit that left others flabbergasted. These merchants more or less did anything for money and were generally detested by others. And now, when they were given the chance to release their stress, how could they be lenient? This was especially true for his rice stand's waiter. With rag bags in his hands, he relentlessly beat down on the men. Furthermore, with so many people hitting these men, they couldn't identify who was hitting them. So these people didn't have to worry about the consequences. There is strength in numbers. Kai Yang only asked for aid, but before he could lift a finger, he was pushed aside by these merchants. After a while, the beating gradually stopped and you could see the two men curled on the ground, bruised all over. The rag bag had also disappeared. Looking at the men, Su Mu's heart cried out in pain, and his legs started to cramp. For the men were beaten bloody and their faces so swollen that even their mothers won't be able to recognize them. This situation only occurred because the men didn't have enough strength to protect themselves. Although they had swords, one could see that it was only for decoration. If they could use them, would they suffer these attacks? Though on the other hand, how could experts stoop so low as to perform such despicable acts? Now, even though the beating was finished, the merchants remained. The two Han men with their horrendous faces and hearts full of fear weakly called, "Su!" their hands trembling. Unfortunately, Su Mu's expression changed and he loudly exclaimed, "What's Su? You want this young master to give you pasty bones?" Seeing this, Kai Yang smiled and proclaimed, "You two scumbags. I don't know how many others you have framed, but it's extremely hateful." His words are an exaggeration, but for the merchants present, this seemed like the truth. That waiter who previously held the rag bag spat, "Pay, you trashes. You actually dared to act arrogantly at this rice stand." The waiter continued to let out his frustrations, but didn't expect Kai Yang to expand on his statement. "Correct. These types of people should really die. Fellow disciple, why don't you and I each kill one? That will teach them to break the law again and also be for the greater good." Hearing this remark, the two people on the floor started to break out in cold sweat and were terrified. They had never expected this frail boy to be so ruthless. Su Mu just stared at him, trying to figure out whether or not he was joking. But Kai Yang's face held no sign that it was a joke. To tell the truth, although what the men did was cowardly, it wasn't serious enough to die for. Undoubtedly, Kai Yang's punishment was a little too cruel. Su Mu could only ask, "Brother, isn't that a bit excessive? Right?" "Excessive?" Kai Yang just shook his head. If their little lie were to succeed today, then Bossy's life would have been ruined. How would he maintain a livelihood? This is pushing people to the limits, so how is this excessive? For every person, every action that they do will have a consequence. Previously, when those merchant heard Kai Yang's words, they had also thought this. But hearing his reasoning, they understood the sense behind his words and were conflicted. But the final decision wasn't up to them, so they just stood on the sidelines. But when Bossy wanted to say something, he was stopped by a look from Kai Yang. This may certainly be the case, but we can't just casually go killing people." Now Su Mu was really worried. He didn't think that this disciple in front of him was so ruthless and merciless. Originally he had planned it out quite well. Firstly, those two men would go slander Boss He and then he would go and stop them, saving Boss He. Then they would escape and he would receive gratitude from the boss, thus accomplishing his goal. But he hadn't thought that such a vicious disciple would appear, so easily choosing to kill them. This was far from good. Su Mu could see that the two men were pleading him to save them. Within those gazes were signs of threats. How could Su Mu not understand their meaning? It was like being tied to the body of a grasshopper. If we are to suffer a tragic end, then you would not come out unharmed. That was their meaning. At that moment, Kai Yang said, "Brother, there is no other method. Through my experiences, killing is a natural thing. Could it be that you haven't killed before? Or you guys already know each other? So you are unwilling to kill?" This statement made Su Mu's heart jump to his throat. Turning around to look at Kai Yang, he found a mischievous smile. "Brother, what do you mean?" With a cool face he questioned, while thinking whether or not Kai Yang saw through him. He hadn't revealed any clues, so how could he know? What he didn't know was that Kai Yang knew of his plan purely by coincidence. If not, he would had also been fooled. Bossy was also smart. He understood the hidden meaning in Kai Yang's words and asked Su Mu, "Little brother, what tune are you singing?" Kai Yang had revealed a portion of Su Mu's true colors. How could Boss he not be able to see? Kai Yang just shook his head. He didn't point out anything in particular but just continued to stare at Su Mu. "Brother, I think that you are a courageous person, but you are hesitating. Don't worry. I am here to accompany you and the villagers too. So what are you afraid of?" "What am I afraid of?" Su Mu laughed out loud. As if reassuring himself, he said, "What am I afraid of? Isn't it just killing a person? Who hasn't killed before?" It was like he was unwillingly to admit he hadn't killed before, in front of Kai Yang. In the end, this person's disposition shocked him. Su Mu hadn't stepped down from the challenge. Su Mu then directed a cold, ruthless intent towards the men lying on the ground. Looking into that young man's eyes, those two men knew they were finished. This round they were used too thoroughly. "Brother, let's do it." Kai Yang continued to pour oil on the flame. Breathing deeply, Su Mu slowly nodded. Seeing this happen, The two men immediately knew their end was nigh. So how could they endure without doing anything? Jumping up, they pointed towards Su Mu and proclaimed, "Su Mu, you treacherous bastard! You asked us brothers for a favor, to slander boss he stands so that you could come to the rescue and become a hero. But how do you repay us? Not only are we beaten like pigs, now we have to die for your crimes. You really are trash. You lie!" Hearing his scheme revealed, Su Mu was furious. Humph! As if their injuries didn't affect them, the men just sneered and the larger man shouted out loudly, informing all, "Everybody, young or old, today my brother and I came out and caused trouble for you." But this was all at the command of Su Mu. He had taken fancy to Boss He's daughter, but sadly she rejected him. So he hatched a plan to obtain her. When this was revealed, something clicked inside the heads of the onlookers. Many people could not help but turn to look at Su Mu with disbelief in their eyes. So that was it. Kai Yang was satisfied that he had guessed correctly. Su Mu really had an ulterior motive. Though he had thought it was something related to profit or reputation. He hadn't thought it was actually for his own sexual desires. He had also met the boss daughter. Even though she wasn't outrageously beautiful, she was still a work of art. Alluring body, delicate features, slim figure, and the most beautiful girl in the entire village at only 14. Such a young girl, unfortunately, had caught Su Mu's eye, provoking such trouble. What utter rubbish! Su Mu's face was as red as a tomato, trying to deny the truth. Sneering, the man continued to say, "I have said no lies. Even though us two brothers have our faults, and do some criminal acts, slandering boss he and poisoning his rice, this we would never do. Fellow people, you should know that sabotaging others' livelihoods is equal to sabotaging my own. So how can I survive? Everything was instigated by this little brat." This statement was very sincere, causing everybody to start laughing. In a timely manner, Kai Yang asked, "After this was over, how much did he promise to give?" 52 silvers. The man replied, 52, that's a lot. Kai Yang softly said while nodding. During this banter, boss he was listening carefully. This made him understand the situation thoroughly. Turning towards Su Mu, he angrily said, "You despicable person. You actually dared to use such dirty methods to get my daughter. Thankfully she has eyes and saw your true face. How could Sky Tower have such a degenerate disciple? You are ruining your school's good name. You are vain and selfish, with a character completely opposite to Brother Yang. I feel ashamed for your mother and father." Surrounding merchants also started to feel more contempt towards Su Mu's outrageous acts. Su Mu's face was bright red, for he knew that he could no longer come back to Black Plum Village, for his mask had been taken away and his true face revealed. And the source of all his misfortunes was in front of him. This disciple! If not for him, he would have been able to win the boss' favor and further his reputation. That would have made it easier to curry the daughter's love for him. But all that planning had gone to waste. Not only had he failed to gain any reputation, he had also lost reputation he had previously for being a disciple of Sky Tower. Under that situation, Su Mu put on a calm face and turned towards Kai Yang and asked, "Brother, how may I call you?" "You guess," Kai Yang replied with a wink. Taking a deep breath, Su Mu said, "Though you may choose to withhold your identity, I will able to find out. For you have already entered the school for 3 years, yet you are not an official disciple. That means you are a trial disciple, and within the entire school, there are only a few of you. Finding you will be simple." When he finished, he immediately turned around and left. In the end, he did have some strength. For those who blocked his path, he pushed them to the side, waltzing away unhindered. When he had left, the people had only just remembered the 2 Han men. But where were they? There was no trace, for when Kai Yang and Su Mu were arguing, they had sneakily ran away. The debacle had finally been resolved. Kai Yang was satisfied, for he had exposed the deceit, gained approval from the merchants and boss. He was especially grateful to him. That waiter also looked at Kai Yang in worship. After the crowd dispersed, the boss wife also came out. Taking Kai Yang's hand, the more she looked, the more she came to like him. On the contrary, Boss, he was full of worry. Virtuous nephew Yang. Today you have offended Su Mu. I'm afraid that in the future, this will cause you ceaseless trouble. After this incident, boss, he started to refer to Kai Yang more intimately. Afraid? Kai Yang just smiled. The main gate has its own rules, so even if he hates me to death, he can't do anything. Even so, you must be careful, nephew. If because of your involvement in this matter you were to suffer misfortune, then I as your uncle would worry greatly. I will be careful, he consoled. Kai Yang was immensely grateful to the he couple for extending a helping hand. They even insisted he stay for dinner. Originally Kai Yang wanted to, but was scared away by the boss wife. Little Yang, where are you parents? Where do you live? Have you married already? Looking at this, clearly the boss wife wanted to become his mother-in-law. Knowing this, Kai Yang hurriedly left. When he left, he was carrying a bag of white rice, but it far surpassed the amount 20 silvers could get you. So for an entire month, Kai Yang didn't have to worry about his meals. Originally, Kai Yang was worried that Su Mu would ambush him on his way back. For as innocent as Su Mu looked, he was a sinister and treacherous snake on the inside. This was not impossible. Though even when Kai Yang returned, Su Mu hadn't appeared. He thought about it carefully. Not attacking was the correct choice. Even though duels between disciples often resulted in death, the main gate didn't allow the needless killing of others. In short, if Su Mu had attacked on his way back to the school, then when things leaked out, it would have resulted in his own doom too. If he wanted to deal with Kai Yang, then he would definitely come to challenge him while making a fuss too. As for the matter of Kai Yang's identity, there is no doubt that he would be able to find it. In the Sky Tower, as long as Su Mu inquired a bit, then naturally he would find his identity. Su Mu's true strength, Kai Yang didn't fully see, but he most definitely was at the peak of the tempered body. The only thing was he didn't know what stage exactly. Seems like he must focus more on his practices. Otherwise, Kai Yang truly couldn't continue staying at Sky Tower. Knowing this, Kai Yang swiftly returned back to his hut to practice. At this hour, he was unable to practice the tempered body record, but he could practice the basic skills that the school gave. These basic skills were to establish the foundations for the tempered body, to achieve spiritual consumption beyond his own body. This was the aim. Kai Yang's previous usage of the Shaolin arts and the leg whip were all based around his foundation work. If not for this, then the skills couldn't be considered true martial arts. They would only be considered as the basic of basic skills, essential for all schools and families. To the left of Kai Yang's hut, there a wooden figure. This was made from a century-old tree, by Kai Yang to practice on. Small dents were littered over it. There were even traces of blood. These were all made through Kai Yang's many days of diligent training. Assuming his position, Kai Yang started to hit the wooden man. He infused all his might into each strike, beating the wooden man relentlessly. Pong, pong rang out as he struck the wooden man. However, after a few strikes, he felt that something was amiss. It was his own fists and legs, so he clearly felt that they were stronger than before. From the strike and the sound it made, all of them were stronger and more stable, incomparable to before. And over time, his hand and the bones started to feel numb and warm. This clearly indicated that he was stimulating his meridians, increasing his atmospheric affinity. Reaching the tempered body fourth stage gives birth to the atmospheric affinity, developing your meridians further and allowing you to sense the energy more clearly. This warm feeling was Kai Yang's meridians developing. Kai Yang practiced until the sun set, only then did he stop. Even after this period of time, not only was he not fatigued, he even felt more alive. Ever since he merged with that golden skeleton, his strength seemed to skyrocket. Walking 20 miles today didn't even tire him out. Even with the added weight of the sack of rice, he hadn't become fatigued. It was only when he was cultivating his tempered body that he would truly feel pressured. Thinking about that morning's practice, Kai Yang couldn't help but shudder. That pressure was like the heaven and earth were crushing him, horrifying. But with pressure come development. Without extreme pressure, how could you possibly advance? Only then would a person's true potential show. And only then would your strength grow, step by step, each time breaking past your limits. Though currently, even after throwing large amounts of punches and kicks out, Kaiyang has yet to feel any fatigue. He doesn't feel strained. How can he force out his potential and improve? This made things difficult and made him depressed. That skeleton also gave him extreme recovery, making the basic skills of the school useless. Did that mean that he could only practice for half an hour each day at sunrise? Daylight had around 12 full hours, and yet he could only practice for half an hour. What would he do the rest of the time? Sleep? This was obviously impossible. Kaiyang immediately rejected the idea. While he absent-mindedly cooked, Kaiyang thought about how he should train to exhaustion. If anyone else knew of this, they would have laughed to death. Other practitioners may have wanted to take it easier, but Kaiyang wanted to push himself to the limit. In the end, he still couldn't think of any good methods, though the main reason was Kaiyang needed elixirs to help boost his training. There were also other methods, but in the end, all of these had one thing in common: they required money. In Sky Tower, contribution points were the currency. Alas, Kaiyang was poor and only had a measly 12 points. After the rice finished cooking, he wolfed down a few bowls. Although there were no sides dishes, and he could only eat plain rice, Kaiyang was very satisfied. That was the only meal in the past few days, which made him full. After dinner, he couldn't go train, so he went to take a bath. After that, he lay down and went to bed. Continuing his practice, there would be no result, so he might as well try to solve that problem. Consider the solutions to hasten the work speed. After thinking for a while, he suddenly remembered. The black book. One of the pages had something inside, so Kaiyang figured that the other pages would be the same. So if he had enough strength, he could unseal each page. The first page contained the golden skeleton, which was also the cause of his current predicament, while the second dealt with the methods to cultivate the tempered body with golden skeleton. However, the third page remained blank. He had already tried to decipher it, but Kaiyang concluded he wasn't strong enough yet. With the first and second pages unlocked, Kaiyang could start to study them. But after good half-day, he still couldn't figure them out, until he accidentally turned to the third page and went into a trance. Kaiyang frowned as he started to read the third page. Almost instantly, countless gold words started to appear on the page and jumped into his mind. Then a small whirlpool started to appear in the center of the page. From it arose an antique incense burner. This turn of events left Kaiyang in shock, but quickly he started to rejoice. Alright, didn't he break through into the fourth stage this morning? Last night he was still in the third stage, but today he's in the fourth. So that's why he couldn't access the third page before? Although it was only one level, it had still hindered his ability to comprehend the third page. After he thought about this, Kaiyang couldn't help but feel regret. If this morning he had discovered this, then he wouldn't need to waste time now thinking about it. Calming his beating heart, Kaiyang held the incense burner and carefully inspected it. This burner wasn't large in size, and was a common item used by people. But it was half-sealed, with a lid on the mouth and a few holes. It was also antique and of outstanding quality, but it wasn't attention-grabbing at all. Gently he sniffed, but there was no odor, and slowly he lowered it. What is it made of? Even after a while, Kaiyang still didn't know but could only go on the information imprinted in his mind. After a short pause, Kaiyang opened his eyes with a strange look in them. According to the information in his mind, this incense burner could aid him during training. The burner itself has no special properties. However, if you were to gather herbs and burn them in it, the fragrance released would aid you during training. Different herbs were needed for different stages. Unfortunately, Kaiyang had some doubts. The plants needed to aid him at his current level were the 3-leaf destruction, Chaos Spirit Flower, and the dead Jedi tree grass. According to his understanding, the value of these two herbs were not high, but they were very hard to find. They also possessed small amounts of toxins. Inhaled over a short period of time, these toxins would do no lasting damage, but over many years the accumulation in your body would really injure you. Would these two herbs really be effective in helping him? These herbs were definitely available in the contribution hall, but with Old Man Meng's personality, he would definitely charge high prices for them. And with only a few points in his possession, how could he spend them like that? There was only one option left. He would have to venture into the Black Wind Mountains to look for them himself. Kai Yang had already hunted in there before, so was quite familiar with its geography, and perhaps the herbs were there. Tomorrow into the mountains he shall go. With his problems currently solved, Kai Yang slowly drifted to sleep. But before he fell asleep, he checked the 4th page so as to not repeat this morning's embarrassing action. Unfortunately, nothing appeared. It seemed that tempered body 4th stage was not sufficient for this page. The next morning, Kai Yang got up early. Yesterday's practice had already had such a large impact on his cultivation, so naturally he would make full use of the short time he had to cultivate. Not to mention, he was not a lazy person. While immersing himself in the purple eastern gas, that slow but with the might of heaven and earth infused, tempered body record fists might gradually unfolded. While he was a stage stronger than yesterday, Kai Yang still didn't make much progress on the fist. You could only perform it 20 times, and when he touched his back, torturous pain responded. His back, hip and bones all ached. They felt like smashed beans. Inhaling a mouthful of purple gas, his bodily senses as energy became clearer. His meridians all opened up and began to expel the impurities in his body. With his daily training finished, he started his sweeping, which since absorbing the golden skeleton he had been able to complete in only 1 hour. After he finished sweeping, he ran to the contribution hall. Although Kai Yang had decided to go into the mountains to find the herbs, he had no knowledge regarding herbology. He had only heard of the 3-leaved chaos spirit flower and the dead Jedi tree grass, and didn't know what they looked like. Most of his preparatory work for his journey into the Black Wind Mountain was done. To avoid an embarrassing situation, Kai Yang hurried to the contribution hall to write down the herb's appearance. Originally he had planned to ask Treasurer Meng to teach him. He hadn't expected Treasurer Meng to give him a book on herbs instead. Looking at the book, Kai Yang found that it had an introduction to herbs and their medical properties, habitats, and illustrations, though it would create a feeling of disappointment in those who read it, as it merely contained information on ordinary grade herbs and nothing on the herbs of a higher grade, but it was quite suitable for Kai Yang's current needs. Just as practitioners were classified into different ranks, so too were herbs, weapons, and medicinal pellets. They were divided into ordinary grade, earth grade, heaven grade, mystery grade, spirit grade, and saint grade. Each of the grades were then divided into the lower, middle, and peak level. Luckily, the herbs that Kai Yang needed were both ordinary grade, lower class herbs, so they were in the book. And since they were such a low grade, their value wasn't high. After he left the contribution hall, Kai Yang went to the General Affairs office. After all, he was still a sweeper of sky towers, and this roundabout journey to Black Wind Mountain would take more than a day. So he had to ask to be excused from his work. The General Affairs office didn't make things difficult for him. They gave Kai Yang 3 days of leave. With his obligations taken care of, he set off. Black Wind Mountain was only 20 miles away from Sky Tower by foot. Since it wasn't that far, Kai Yang frequently went there to hunt for his meals, making him quite familiar with the terrain. In this mountain was a vast and diverse range of herbs. But since it was his first time collecting herbs, Kai Yang made sure to be fully prepared. Carrying his water, food supplies, a shovel, and a bag, he hit the road. Rushing over, Kai Yang came to Black Wind Mountain and surveyed the area. The mountain was like a prehistoric monster, lying down between the heavens and the earth. Imposing, with no end in sight, the mountain with its lush forests, jagged edges proudly stood against the horizon. Standing there, Kai Yang felt a cool breeze blow through his hair. Within Black Wind Mountain lived many ferocious beasts. Some high-leveled ferocious beasts could even make martial practitioners flee with no chance of victory. So generally when people ventured into the mountain, they wouldn't go too deep. The first 30 or so miles were classified as the safe zone, the next 10 miles were the dangerous zone. And the area beyond that was the life-threatening zone. Basically, the deeper you went, the more dangerous it was. Since Kai Yang was only looking for ordinary grade lower-level herbs, he didn't need to venture too far in. So naturally, he didn't have to worry about his safety, as he would only be searching within the safe zone. Currently, it was still in the early hours of the morning, and Kai Yang was trying to recall whether or not he had stumbled upon those herbs in his previous trips to the mountain. But it didn't matter whether he had or not, as he was prepared this time to find them equipped with the knowledge from the book. Thinking back, Kaiyang remembered that there were many potential places for herbs to grow in. In his current situation, he didn't even know the locations of the herbs he wanted to find. But filled with anticipation, Kaiyang followed the familiar track into Black Wind Mountain. After half an hour, Kaiyang spotted his first harvest hidden within the thicket next to the track. He was a bunch of lychee sharp teeth herbs. Harvesting them, Kaiyang put them into his bag and continued his search, thinking to himself this was a good start. Walking down the road, Kaiyang looked at the various vegetation scattered about, and memories of the forest came flooding back, informing him of his location. With his knowledge of the mountain gained from hunting, he could accurately create a mental map of where he was in relation to Sky Tower, preventing him from getting lost. By evening, Kaiyang had collected 4 different types of herbs. When searching for herbs, it is naturally very hard, not to mention that many people like to come here to collect herbs, making it even harder to find them. Although Kaiyang only found 4 herbs, he was still pretty satisfied. Unfortunately, Kaiyang didn't need these 4 herbs. To make matters worse, their grades were only at ordinary grade, lower level 2. Nevertheless, if he were to take them back, he could exchange them for contribution points, so they were of some value. At this time, the sun had already started to set. Hurrying, Kaiyang finally arrived at an area which was suitable for the growth of many herbs. This area was very strange. For all its bountiful vegetation, it was devoid of any living presence. Especially for an area of 30 feet around the area of herbs, the land was completely dead and nothing grew, not even weeds. Though in the center of this wasteland, there were 3 bunches of grass. They fluttered in the wind. Kaiyang saw that they were brown-colored, and thought that was just necrosis. But this was just the grass' natural color. After looking at it in more detail, Kaiyang recognized them as a type of herb and with a sigh of relief, rushed over. Smiling widely, he quickly dug them all up. A little while later, these 3 herbs were collected. As he held these herbs, Kaiyang took out the herbology book that Treasurer Meng gave him earlier and checked it to see where he had seen them before. They were indeed the dead Jedi treegrass. The illustrations, growth, and environment all matched up. Dead Jedi treegrass grew from dead trees, which made it quite easy to find. Basically, in the mountains, any place that had dead land, you could find it growing nearby. Carefully, Kaiyang placed the grass in his bag and took out some water and food, then took out his water and food and looked for a place to eat and rest. This time, when he entered the mountains, his main goal was to find the 3-leaved Chaos Spirit Flower and the dead Jedi treegrass. Now that he had found the dead Jedi treegrass, he needed to switch his focus to the 3-leaved Chaos Spirit Flower. Not only did he need to find the 3-leaved Chaos Spirit Flower, but he also needed a large quantity of it. Kaiyang decided he must double his efforts. Though right now it was already evening and the sun had set. This was naturally an inconvenient time to search for herbs, so Kaiyang decided to find a spot to rest and continue tomorrow. Previously, when he entered into the mountains, he had never stayed overnight. However, as the saying goes, even if you hadn't tasted pork, you have at least seen a pig before. On that note, he naturally knew the dangers of the mountains at night. Man even got to edit the comments. No rest for the wicked after he found the nearest tree. Kaiyang climbed up and looked for a suitable place to sleep. After locating a place, he immediately laid down and closed his eyes. By 1:30 a.m., Kaiyang had yet to fall asleep, so he took out the black book and turned to page 3. With a thought, the incense burner floated out. This was also a little mystery that Kaiyang had solved about the black book. Anything that was stored inside could be called out and returned at will. It was after all a storage book, and the burner had obviously been placed in there before, so this function didn't come as a complete surprise. What Kaiyang didn't understand was that apart from the incense burner, other things could not be stored in the book. This made him wonder, was the black book a soul stone? Do soul stones normally have restrictions on what to accept and reject? After playing with the black book for a while, Kaiyang fell asleep. He had just spent the entire day walking around the mountain after all. After a peaceful night, Kaiyang got up early the next morning and practiced the tempered body record for half an hour. In order to gather a good harvest, he must work very hard for the next 2 days. He also felt that he was on the brink of a breakthrough, Not only did he feel that his atmospheric sense was at the utmost limit, he also felt his body was as well. Kai Yang just needed a final push in order to break through. The discovery that he was near a breakthrough left Kai Yang ecstatic. For it took him 3 years to make it to the tempered body 3rd stage. But on the 2nd day of obtaining this book, he had broken through, and now once again he will break through again. This training speed also made Kai Yang somewhat scared. Practicing the tempered body record consumed a large amount of stamina. So Kai Yang rested afterwards and slowly regained his stamina. After he had regained his stamina, he ate some of the remaining food and continued his search for the herbs. Yesterday he had traveled to all the places from his memory that could potentially grow his required herbs. Today he would have to rely on luck. Fortunately, the value of these herbs were not high, so the chance of finding them today was still high. After an entire day of searching, Kai Yang had found a total of 78 herbs and 2 3-leaved chaos spirit flowers. This time he had finally found the herbs he required to activate the incense burner, but the quantity he had was still lacking. Time passed by and soon darkness came. Kai Yang was still awake though. It was not because he wasn't tired, but rather that he was too hungry to fall asleep. Originally he had planned to hunt some wild game, but had not even seen a single rabbit. Unfortunately, he could only find some fingernail-sized berries which were very sour. When he finished eating them, it only made him feel even more hungry. If I knew that this was going to happen, I would have brought more rice balls. Kai Yang repented. There is no shop in these desolate areas. Where is he going to find food? This hunger was a real embarrassment. Kai Yang then saw in the distance a hint of a fire. Instantly his energy came back. Picking himself up, he walked towards it. They dared to light a fire in a forest. These people were either idiots or they had nothing to fear. This time, these people belonged to the latter. When he approached, a person near the fire thundered, "Who?" At that moment, Kai Yang felt his muscles tighten and his spine shiver. The 2 people by the fire were vigilant. One was tall and the other was short. One had a burly physique and held a bow with an arrow notched. He pointed the arrow at Kai Yang. The other was a young boy, aged about 11, and his eyes were bright and held no trace of fear. In this boy's hand was also a bow, and he also had notched an arrow back, but it was much smaller. Although Kai Yang was faced with the 2 arrows, he didn't have the slightest intention to retaliate. Walking around, he acted as if their threats were nothing big. "Take it easy. I only entered the mountain to collect herbs," Kai Yang quickly said. After they heard this, the 2 people looked at each other. The burly slowly lowered his bow and arrow down. He then signaled for the boy to relax and laughed. "I had thought that the fire had attracted a wild beast, but it was just a false alarm." I'm sorry, Kai said, slightly embarrassed, and laughed. Touching his forehead, the burly man waved towards Kai Yang. "Come. The nights are cold and surviving alone here will not be easy." When he heard this, Kai Yang walked up and sat next to the fire. Beside him, the burly man kept looking at Kai Yang and couldn't but feel pity when he saw Kai Yang's thin, bony body. Now that they were sitting together, it would be natural to talk to each other. From this chat, Kai Yang learnt that this father and son pair lived at the foot of the mountain and came here to hunt and earn a living. Although they weren't rich, it was enough to maintain adequate food and clothing. The boy, although he was young, was a veteran at hunting. And along with his father, they had come to Black Wind Mountains many times to hunt. Thus their knowledge of the mountain was far greater than Kai Yang's. Kai Yang also told them a bit about himself. After he told them that he was a Sky Tower disciple, the burly man was taken aback. While the little boy became more interested in Kai Yang and kept on glancing at him with his glossy, black eyes. The Han man said, "My son also wanted to train to become a practitioner, but his talent was not enough and he was refused. So he practically worships you people." This statement made Kai Yang recall the past 3 years and his experiences. Not only did it move him deeply, it also made him softly rub the boy's head with affection. When he was about to say something, Kai Yang's stomach grumbled loudly. The little boy stared blankly and suddenly laughed out loud. From his bag he took out some dry rations and gave it Kai Yang. This once again made him very moved, but he didn't accept. Kai Yang looked at the burly man and he smiled. Eat it. It seems that you did not eat anything today. This time Kai Yang didn't reject the offering and quickly wolfed down the rations. After chatting some more, the three then went to sleep around the fire. Though Kai Yang didn't dare sleep too heavily. If any danger were to approach the father and son, he would be able to react. He also considered this to be returning the favor for giving him the rations previously. Fortunately, the night passed peacefully and nothing happened. When the morning arrived, Kai Yang didn't wait for the father and son to wake before quietly leaving. But before he left 2 herbs behind as a thank you for last night. If these 2 herbs were crumpled, they had a healing effect. Since they were constantly in the mountains, these herbs were bound to be useful to the father and son pair. With the eastern purple gas increasing in volume, Kai Yang trained the tempered body record for half an hour. When he finished his practice, Kai Yang took in a large breath of the purple gas, causing his meridians to suddenly shake. A warm feeling then began surging through his body. With the energy in his meridians swirling endlessly, the tempered body 5th stage. His intuition was correct, he indeed broke through today. After practicing for half an hour, he really broke through to the next stage. Kai Yang was extremely happy and felt more and more grateful towards the golden skeleton in his body. Although it had not been very long since he obtained the proud golden skeleton, he had broken through twice thanks to it and the tempered body record. This speed was simply unmatched. And this was practicing under quite a number of restrictions. If he could practice all the time, what speed would he reach then? This thought left Kai Yang somewhat speechless. Though after all, the tempered body was only the foundation to becoming a true warrior. Training the early stages were easier, the higher the realms, the greater the difficulty to train in. After a quick rest, Kai Yang continued to search for herbs. Today he had yet again gained quite a harvest. He had collected more than a dozen herbs and caught a plump rabbit, solving his food problems. This was already the 3rd day of his mountain journey, and he had reached the end of the 10-mile safety zone. Any further and Kai Yang dared not to enter inside, for with his current strength his only option was to become food for the beasts within. Although he did not go too deep, his harvest was still quite good. He had collected more than 20 different types of herbs, and counting the previous 2 days he had 40 different types, making his journey here very fruitful. Unfortunately, the 2 main herbs that he needed were very small in quantity. To find 40 different types of herbs in 3 days was no small harvest. Even if they were all ordinary grade, lower rank herbs, he was still able to exchange them for a fair amount of contribution points. But this greatly reduced his training time, doing more harm than good. It was now the afternoon and Kai Yang had started to walk towards the track that would lead him back to Sky Tower. Kai Yang was only given 3 days of leave, so he had to return before tomorrow morning. Otherwise there would be harsh punishment waiting for him. Kai Yang felt he had plenty of time and was certain that he could return before dark. After all, he was only 100 miles away, not a long distance. In his heart he held great anticipation with regard to the Black Book's 3rd page. Thinking about the results it would bring for him made him delighted and put a bounce in his steps. Halfway through his journey back, Kai Yang heard an unexpected, piercing cry not too far from his position. There was the sound of a child screaming, va crying mixed in. When he heard this, he paused his footsteps and strained his ears. Soon after, his face changed and Kai Yang swiftly ran towards the direction of the sound. When he was listening to the sound, he recognized it as the sounds of the father and son pair from the night before. And that child's crying sound was from the little boy. Those 2 probably had encountered some sort of trouble, or why would they make such a ruckus? Last night they had given Kai Yang some of their rations, and even if were for their past kindness, how could he just ignore their trouble? As he ran towards them, the father's roaring became increasingly desperate and the boys grew softer and softer. Kai Yang's face gradually hardened and he started to have a bad feeling. By the time Kai Yang arrived, the father's roar could no longer be heard, and he only saw a dark cave in a high hill. To the side of the cave, in the midst of some bushes, tangled between some spider webs, was a silver bow. This bow, the same one the little boy had been holding the previous night. Without thinking, Kai Yang threw his possessions onto the ground, heightened his senses and plunged straight into that dark and sinister cave. Although the light inside the cave was not bright, it was still enough to see. When he looked around, Kai Yang was shocked to discover that the cave was covered in webs. On the walls and the ground, they crisscrossed each other and varied in thicknesses. Layer upon layer, the road ahead was blocked by the multitude of webs. Not only that, the cave was damp. The water dripped down at a steady pace, and when Kai Yang took a step forward, his foot sank into the ground. Steeling his nerves, Kai Yang walked to the sound of deep breathing. Only he saw a large human-sized cocoon spun from a spider's thread in a chrysalis-like state. At the top, it revealed a human face. That face belonged to the burly man from the night before. Worriedly, Kai Yang dashed over to the trapped hunter. His worry eased upon discovering that he was only unconscious. Hearing Kai Yang calling to him, the hunter groggily awoke and called feebly, "Save the child! My son was dragged further inside. I beg of you, please save my child." Got dragged inside? This shocked Kai Yang, as he struggled to free the hunter from the web. Sadly, the web was too strong for his current strength. Being unable to break it, he could only temporarily give up. Diving into the hole, he chased after the little boy. From behind, the hunter warned, "Be careful! That is a demonic spider beast." When he heard the words, demonic spider beast, Kai Yang's heart thumped loudly. These demonic beasts were not like ordinary wild animals. They loved to slaughter. They were true ferocious beasts, and Kai Yang was not a match for even the lowest among them with his current strength. In the Black Wind Mountains, the reason why the first 30 miles were deemed a safe zone was precisely because there were no ferocious beasts. Unfortunately, it seemed one had appeared. This was seriously outside one's expectations. Now that he knew it was a ferocious beast, Kai Yang movements became more and more cautious and soft. Slowly, he groped his way through the tunnel, and after about 10 feet, he spotted the little boy. The son was in a similar situation to his father, wrapped up in a cocoon which was suspended in mid-air by a larger spider web. At the side of the little boy, there was an enormously large flower-patterned spider sucking on a straw. The straw was inserted in the little boy's arm, and you could clearly see the dark red blood streaming out from the straw and into the spider's mouth. On the ground of this hillside cave were various bones of all different types of beasts piled up like mountains. One could only imagine the amount of time the demonic spider beast had spent living here and the number of poor souls, humans and animals alike, that had fallen prey to it. Kai Yang had no time to spare to think about this spider's capabilities and form an appropriate plan. Every second he delayed increased the chances of this little boy ascending straight to heaven. After a moment's silence, he suddenly charged forward. The enormously large, flower-patterned spider did not expect to be disturbed at that moment. Shortly after Kai Yang charged forward, a large amount of force was applied to the side of the demonic spider, and a large hole was torn in the web. The flower-patterned spider fell alongside Kai Yang. The little boy also fell through the hole and onto the ground. Being attacked so suddenly caused the flower-patterned spider to be furious. Its 8 long, hairy legs stamped the ground, and all of its eyes focused on Kai Yang. Before he even had time to get up, he was pinned down by a single pounce from the flower-patterned spider. Kai Yang snarled. A steel fist flew out and landed squarely on the throat of the spider. This momentarily stunned it. Kai Yang took the opportunity to kick the spider, sending it flying away. With a single roll, Kai Yang got to his feet and crouched down, his eyes fully focused on the movements of that flower-patterned spider. After that small confrontation, Kai Yang's furiously beating heart had calmed slightly. For that demonic beast's rank was not that high, otherwise he would even be able to struggle against it. It's most likely that it's only a first-realm demonic beast. However, even if it was only a first-realm demonic beast, given Kai Yang's current strength, it was still a difficult opponent. As both sides were sizing up their opponents, the flowered-patterned spider started to show signs of impatience. And it wasn't just him. Kai Yang began to exhibit them as well. That it seemed that the little boy had lost too much blood and was showing signs of poisoning. If the current situation could not be resolved quickly, then there would be no time to save him. Abruptly, the flower-patterned spider opened its mouth to spit out a long, gem silk thread. It spat the thread towards Kai Yang, signaling the start of its attack. Previously, Kai Yang had learnt about this thread's durability, so naturally he was wary to not be trapped by it. At once, he rolled to the side and narrowly dodged the attack. The flower-pattern spider didn't show much reaction to his dodge and continued to spit out other thread pieces. By the time Kai Yang noticed the spider wasn't aiming at him, it was already too late. The entire cave had been covered in a web of these threads, sealing off his exits and trapping him inside. Is it forcing me to fight to the death? Kai Yang laughed at that thought. Any fear he had previously harbored was quickly expelled by the arrogance seeping out from his bones, pumping adrenaline through his body. With the current situation, if he didn't kill the spider, he would not be able to leave. Since it had come to that, he could only fight to the bitter end. Either you die or I die. With time ticking, Kai Yang could not afford to delay. Firmly planting both feet on the ground, he sprinted towards the flower-patterned spider. Out flew another strand of thread. Fortunately, Kai Yang was on guard, so how could he not avoid it? After dodging 3 of these threads in succession, he had finally closed the distance between them. But before he could throw out a punch, that flower-patterned spider raised its front 2 legs and drove them towards him. Kai Yang could only lift up his arm to block. The spider's forelimbs pierced through his arm. Kai Yang roared out in pain, his blood boiled out. Not only was he not in a fearful panic, instead he had an indescribable feeling of excitement and anticipation in his heart. All of his bones clanking together caused a warm feeling passed through his entire body. Throwing out a punch, Kai Yang's fist whistled through the air and smashed into the eyes on the left-hand side of the flower-patterned spider's head. The moment his fist hit, it pulverized 2 eyes. The flower-patterned spider was horrified. Even with its limited intellectual capacity, it knew to fear that human with blood dripping from their arm. When it went to retract its 2 legs that were lodged in Kai Yang's arms, the spider found that the arm muscles had tightened around its forelimbs, so the spider couldn't pull them out. Kai Yang's second punch followed shortly after his first, pulverizing another 2 eyes. The flower-patterned spider screeched out in pain, incessantly trying to retreat, but its hind legs could only scratch at the ground. In desperation, it lashed out at Kai Yang, leaving many shallow wounds on his arms. Although they weren't deep, they still drew blood. But the pain only served to increase Kai Yang's excitement. His whole body bubbled with overflowing strength. The corners of his mouth curved into a cold and merciless smile. His fists flew endlessly towards the spider's forehead. Under the unceasing barrage of attacks, the flower-patterned spider's forehead cracked open, and its bodily fluids oozed out. A dismal whimper escaped from its mouth. The flower-patterned did not wish to sit and wait for its death. From its mouth, it spat out streams of its web, and at such close proximity, the web wrapped Kai Yang up. However, at that moment, the flower-patterned spider was in a horrible state. Its head was disfigured so much that it had nearly burst. If it hadn't become a demonic beast and gained the tenacious vitality that is associated with it, it would have already died many times over. Since this was the case, even though it had trapped him with its web, under Kai Yang's relentless fists, it soon ceased all signs of struggling. Kai Yang would have never imagined he could win a fight with a demonic beast. Furthermore, not only had he survived, he had also killed it. Even though it was a first-realm demonic beast, it was still not something a cultivator at the tempered body 5th stage should be able to defeat. Although Kai Yang's wounds weren't considered light, he didn't feel much pain from them, as if they nothing at all. After certifying that the flower-patterned spider was truly dead, Kai Yang went to extract the leg that had pierced into his arm. When he pulled it out, a gush of warm blood followed. Without even pausing to inspect his injuries, Kai Yang tore apart the spider web that was binding him and rushed to the little boy's side. Gently cradling his body, he brought him out of the cave. The little boy's father had managed to finally escape from his web cocoon. And just as he was preparing to run further into the cave, he saw a blood-drenched Kai Yang carry out his son. He quickly inquired, "What happened to him?" "He has lost too much blood and has also been poisoned," Kai Yang replied. After reaching the cave's entrance, Kai Yang placed the little boy onto the ground and raced towards his fallen bag. Taking out some of the herbs inside, he began chewing on them. Without hesitation, he called over the hunter. Chew on these herbs to soften them, then feed them to him. The hunter was already scared out of his wits, so when he heard Kai Yang's orders, he didn't hesitate. Swiftly, he placed the herbs into his mouth and began to chew them diligently. In that moment, Kai Yang's mind was all too clear. His understanding of each herb's medicinal properties began to appear in his mind within his mind. Which herbs could detoxify, which herbs could help with healing, which herbs could help staunch blood flow. The knowledge flowing through his mind was comparable to that of a veteran pharmacist. After a short period of time, Kai Yang took out the herbs he had been chewing on and smeared them over the little boy's arm. The hunter followed his actions and began to feed the chewed-up herbs to his son. Under the nervous gazes of the two people, color gradually returned to the boy's pale face and his breathing steadied. The hunter could finally release the tension in his heart and fell on his buttocks. Crying out loudly, he said, "Fortunately nothing happened. Fortunately nothing happened." Kai Yang poured cold water on his newfound hope. "Not yet. My herbs are only low-leveled ones and can only alleviate his symptoms. You have to leave the mountain and find a doctor. Otherwise, I'm afraid that the poison will become incurable." The hunter could only listen to Kai Yang's advice. Immediately he said, "Then I shall go take him to find a doctor now." "There's no hurry," said Kai Yang as he held out his hand to stop him. "Allow your son to stabilize first, then move him. Oh, what the Savior says is correct." With such a great catastrophe befalling on the hunter, he had long since lost his nerve. So whatever Kai Yang said, he would follow. After replying, he remembered that his savior was also injured. His injuries were not light, so he worriedly asked, "Savior, do you not want to also treat your own wounds?" Kai Yang replied, "Not need, but you have shed such a large amount of blood. How is that all right?" The hunter looked at him in shock. "I don't know." Standing up, Kai Yang jumped up and down vivaciously. "Even I don't know, but I feel great." He not only felt great, but also excited. Kai Yang suspected all this was somehow related to his golden skeleton. But how could he explain it to a simple hunter? As he thought back to the recent fight, Kai Yang's blood began to boil once again. That was the very first time he had ever been in a life-or-death situation. But he had not experienced even the slightest amount of fear. Instead, he had only felt enjoyment at the feeling of blood splattering all around him, like it was the most common occurrence. "That's right, please wait a bit. I will return soon." As he picked up his bag, Kai Yang once again rushed into the cave. The hunter thought he had gone to sort out the demonic beast's corpse, but that was not it. Although the flower-patterned spider was a demonic beast, its corpse didn't hold any value. It was too low-leveled. Kai Yang's goal was to pick herbs growing inside the cave. Before he had begun his battle with the flower-patterned spider, he had discovered a large amount of purple-colored flowers. Previously, he didn't have the time to examine them, but now that he thought back to them, his spirits couldn't help but rise. If he didn't see incorrectly, those purple-colored flowers were actually the three-leaved chaos spirit flowers that he desperately needed. Three-leaved chaos spirit flowers grew in dark and damp places with a lot of corpses, making this cave an ideal environment for them to grow in. With his heart full of anticipation as he entered the cave, Kai Yang nearly laughed. Such was his joy. Helping others will really reward you well. It seemed that this saying was true. If he had not come to rescue the father and son pair, then he would never have found the herbs that he was looking for. The vast expanse of purple flowers in front of him truly were the three-leaved chaos spirit flowers. Plus, there appeared to be a vast quantity of them. A quick count showed there were at least 30 to 40 of these flowers. These small purple flowers, all bunched together, would make anyone who saw them feel delighted. Without further ado, Kai Yang hurriedly took out his shovel and started to harvest these herbs. While he busied himself, Kai Yang's heart was more than content. Just as he was preparing to leave the cave, Kai Yang discovered a red, mushroom-like plant in the corner of the cave. His curiosity piqued. Kai Yang walked towards it to carefully examine it. This thing was about the size of a bowl, dark red, and was like a mushroom or fungus. Kai Yang didn't recognize this thing, for it was not mentioned in the little book that Treasurer Meng had given him. Could it be a priceless treasure? Rolling up his sleeves, Kai Yang went to pick the mushroom-like plant. As for the matter of its identity, he could work it later. It wouldn't take much space up anyway. By the time Kai Yang exited the cave, his bag was filled to the brim. "Let's go. I will descend the mountain with you," Kai Yang told the hunter, treating him like an equal. Many thanks to the savior. The hunter was moved to tears, for he knew that Kai Yang was worried they would encounter more danger on the journey out. That's why he was following them. "We just happened to be traveling the same path. No need for thanks," Kai Yang replied humbly, and the three of them quickly descended the mountain. By evening they had arrived back at town, and in the dark, they searched for the doctor's home. Even after settling the little boy, Kai Yang wasn't in a rush to leave. After all, that night the little boy had given him some of his rations. So he had to stay until the boy opened his eyes. Only after that would his heart be at peace. Inside, the hunter was paced around restlessly, worried about his boy. Before long, the doctor shooed him out, saying he was too noisy. Dr. Chu said, "It is fortunate we did some emergency treatment. Otherwise my son would have truly lost his life. Savior, your mercy and kindness I will be forever unable to repay. Even if I worked hard my entire life, I will be unable." As soon as he finished speaking, the hunter knelt down in front of Kai Yang. Kai Yang did not help him up but smiled and said, "Big brother Zhang, men only kneel before gold. With you kneeling, you have harmed our good relationship. You do not need to kneel in the future. I also ate some of your child's rations. If you are talking about owing, then I owe you too." After finishing his sentence, he went to help Hunter Zhang up. Hunter Zhang was moved to tears. "Savior, you truly are a good person." As they were speaking, the doctor walked outside and said to Hunter Zhang, "It is no longer dangerous, so you need not worry. But because he has lost a large amount of blood, he will be asleep for a while longer, but once he wakes up, he'll be fine." When they heard those words, Kai Yang and Hunter Zhang both let out sighs of relief. Once he relaxed, Kai Yang felt a wave of exhaustion flow through his body. Today had been far too exciting. He had also received many wounds and lost a lot of blood. Even with his previous energy, his body had still received damage, so when he relaxed himself, he fell asleep, sleeping until the sun rose. Early in the morning, Sky Tower. Many of the disciples woke up early with high spirits. Together they gathered in a certain region, waiting in anticipation. Thirsty eyes, craned necks, an unruly state of mind. These things were consistent throughout the crowd. Together they surrounded the house like a housewife who had waited many years for her husband to return home, exemplifying that devotion and expectation. With the passing of time, the number of people who gathered gradually increased. It was like they were telepathically connected. Everybody turned their heads at the same time to look at one place. That place was the path that led to the residence of Kai Yang, a small little hut. Today was the day when they could once again challenge Kai Yang. This was equivalent to a free contribution point box. How could these disciples give up this golden opportunity? Some people pitied Kai Yang's predicament. For every 5 days he was challenged and beaten to a pulp. This was really a bit too brutal. However, sympathy alone could not help Kai Yang. Even if they did not challenge him, many others would gladly take their place. In the end, he will still be beaten to a pulp, so they might as well do it themselves. At least they could take it easy on him. When they thought about it like that, they all came to try their luck. And, if he chose me, I will definitely hit lightly so he will not be injured too badly. Many people were making excuses like this in their hearts. Typically Kai Yang was already awake and had begun to sweep the area by this time. But it was really strange today. Even after waiting quite a while, they still had not seen Kai Yang. Even when they tiptoed over to look around, they could not find him. What's with Kai Yang? Did he oversleep? How come he has yet to come out? I don't know, thinking about it. Has anyone seen him in these past few days? Could it be that he has already left Sky Tower? Impossible. It's not like you don't know about Kai Yang's stubbornness. Even if you killed him, he would not leave. If he really wanted to leave, he would have left a couple months ago. when he was made into a trial disciple. Why would he wait such a long time just to leave in the end anyway? Surprisingly, with all the discussion going on, no one knew that a few days prior, Kai Yang had asked for leave to enter the Black Wind Mountains and had yet to return. Though this was no surprise, for during normal days, Kai Yang did not interact much with others, and so naturally no one knew of his whereabouts. While this group were making a ruckus, a person had started to walk towards this crowd. His face was flawless like jade, and his body also like jade. He really was a handsome youth. But no one knew why at that moment. This youth's expression was very gloomy. As he walked, he was gnashing his teeth and cursing someone. Following behind this youth were a large number of Sky Tower disciples. Surrounding him, they made him the center of attention. While the youth was surrounded, he showed a very unpleasant face. He said in doubt, "Why is it? Why are there so many people here?" In response to his request, someone hurriedly came up to him and informed him in a lowered voice, "Master Su, today is the day when we can challenge Kai Yang. So many fellow disciples have gathered here today to collect some contribution points." The youth that was called Master Su furrowed his eyebrows before laughing heartedly. "Looks like our fellow disciple Kai Yang is in an abyss of suffering." His words were full delight at Kai Yang's misfortune. And basically, he is challenged every 5 days. Not only that, he will not admit defeat unless he can no longer stand properly. The person who had spoken earlier further explained. Master Su laughed again. "And this young master feels that the resentment in his heart has decreased greatly. But this is not enough. I must make him leave Sky Tower. For as long as he is not a Sky Tower disciple, I can do whatever I please with him, and no one can say a word." Master Su is right. That brat dared to tarnish your good name. He really cannot differentiate between a noble and a horse. He doesn't even bother to inquire as to Master Su's identity. He is too arrogant. This ass-kissing made Master Su feel much better, causing him to repeatedly nod his head. Master Su, whose reputation Kai Yang had tarnished, was exactly the same Su Mu he had met in Black Plum Village. It was the same Su Mu, along with the 2 Han men, upon whom Kai Yang had enforced justice. Because of this, Su Mu had flown into a rage, inquiring around Sky Tower on the identity of Jai Yang. In the end, he had found out about the ins and outs about Kai Yang in less than a day. After all, he did have his own network of connections and channels. But under the iron rule of the main gate, he could not easily move his hand and had waited until this day to bring a bunch of people over to cause trouble for Kai Yang. Unfortunately, he didn't expect that so many other people would also come for Kai Yang. This made Su Mu somewhat displeased. Waving his hand, he said, "Make them leave. Tell that today, Kai Yang will only be mine today." This statement made Kai Yang sound like some sort of young girl, or like an available prostitute, ready to be brought. The person next to him promptly walked into the crowd, cupped his hands and said, "Fellow disciples, today's battle with Kai Yang. Master Su has already reserved it, so I ask my fellow disciples to please line up at the door and watch. I am sorry any inconvenience." This announcement took many by surprise. They all turned to Su Mu in confusion and asked, "Why should we? Every time, Kai Yang would use his broom to choose the opponent, so for what reason should we allow you to fight him? Even if he did not choose, shouldn't it be first come, first served?" After that was said, someone pulled at the speaker and whispered to them, "That is Su Mu. Do you know who Su Mu is?" Who? This person had just been accepted, so he really didn't know who Su Mu was. Idiot! There is an elder who is surnamed Su. There is also a core disciple within the top 10 surnamed Su. Why don't you say who he is? That person spoke. Although the one listening didn't nod his head in understanding, he still understood the meaning behind those words. He had been temporarily stunned by the information. When he heard that Su Mu had such powerful people backing him, how could he dare make another sound? Winning against Kai Yang will not even earn me many contribution points, so it's best not to offend him. Yes, 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 the person replied while cold sweat dripped down his back. Su Mu was very satisfied with the reaction to his demand, but witnessing this made him snort softly in disdain. Although today's battle with Kai Yang had been secured by Su Mu, the crowd had yet to disperse. They didn't know what Kai Yang had done to offend Sumu, so of course they wanted to stay behind and watch the show. After waiting for some time, Kai Yang still hadn't appeared. Sumu impatiently asked, "Where is he?" "I don't know. Usually, he is already out sweeping the grounds by this time, so I don't know why he has yet to come out." "Master Su, should we check his hut?" After thinking for a bit, Sumu nodded and replied, "That's a good idea. He is just a small and insignificant sweeper, yet he dares to make this Master Su painstakingly wait for him. I will make him pay for this later." The location of Kai Yang's residence was no secret, so the people around Sumu swiftly lead the way. The ones who had stayed behind to watch the show also followed, creating a grand procession of disciples. A short while later, the procession of people had arrived at Kai Yang's small hut. When they saw the pitiful and wretched state of his hut, with holes littering the hut walls, they were not surprised. For no apparent reason, Sumu lifted his hand pointed at the hut. "That brat lives here?" In response to Master Su's question, because Kai Yang is a trial disciple, he must provide for all his own clothing, food, housing, and training materials. The main gate will definitely not provide them for him. This hut was probably built by his own hands. Good, good, good. Sumu laughed happily. Thinking about how drenched Kai Yang would become on rainy days elevated his spirits. Sighing, Sumu controlled his smile and strode confidently, like a dragon or a proud like tiger, forward. With a loud voice, taking care to clearly articulate each word, he called out, "You, Kai Yang, get your arse out for this Master Su and prepare to receive a nice beating." That loud shout was powerful. Like a storm, and yet unlike a storm, it was not detached and uncaring. It was filled with utter hatred. The hatred and bloodthirsty desire made everyone present shiver in their shoes. This clearly displayed the level hatred between Kai Yang and Sumu to the crowd. Evidently it was not a small issue. Sumu stood there, exuding a majestic presence. In this moment it appeared that not even the 8 winds could move him. After he finished shouting, he waited expectantly outside the door for Kai Yang to come running out, while pissing his pants and crying to beg for mercy. The more he thought about it, the more arrogant he became. But no matter how long he waited, there was not even a hint of movement within the hut. Sumu's face was now full of rage. Snarling, he called out again, "Kai Yang, be a smart one and get your arse out here. Otherwise we will come inside and drag you out." Yet, there was still no reply. Sumu now felt there was something odd, for if Kai Yang was really inside, there should be at least sounds of him breathing. Could it be that he was not inside? Sumu signaled the people around him exaggeratedly. That person promptly sprang forward, forcefully kicked down the wooden door and rushed into the small hut. Not long after they had entered, that person ran out again and reported to Sumu, "Master Su, there is no one inside. There is also a small accumulation of dust. Looks like this trash knew that a calamity was approaching, so had fled already." Fled? Sumu nearly vomited blood in anger. He had racked his brains, scheming for many days, all in preparation for this day. The day he would get to exact his revenge and make up for the shame he suffered at the hands of Kai Yang. He had even brought many disciples to come and watch the show. Yet that Kai Yang had unexpectedly fled? This was like a powerful punch had been let out, but landed on a piece of cotton. It made Sumu feel gloomy and depressed. Speaking about it, these past fews, we haven't seen even a hair of Kai Yang. A wise man will submit to the circumstances. Since Kai Yang had offended this Sumu, he probably knew that all hell would break loose, forcing him to leave the main gate. No wonder even after waiting such a long time, he had yet to appear. Ah, now that Kai Yang has left, we will no longer be able to obtain easy contribution points. The crowd muttered softly. None of their mutterings escaped Sumu's ears. Although he was pleased by the respect they were showing him, he hadn't been able to extract his revenge. Thus Sumu's heart was still unsatisfied. After thinking for a while, with a gloomy face, Sumu could only accept the fact he would not get to extract his revenge on Kai Yang today. In a fit of rage he said, "That trash really got lucky, However, my anger will not dissipate. I will get something. Burn down this pitiful hut. This demand alarmed everybody present. Even the people Su Mu had brought with him were stunned. One asked, Master Su, is it a good idea to start a fire inside the school? What are you afraid of? Su Mu eyed him. Even if the sky falls down, I will be there to catch it. Furthermore, it isn't even important to the school. So what if it is destroyed? It wouldn't be much of a loss. Also, leaving this ragged hut standing will harm this younger master's eyes. Hearing him say that dispelled the concerns within their hearts. With the Master Su as backing them, burning this hut is nothing. Before they lit the fire, some went to look for dry grass to use as kindling. After a while, everything was prepared. Grinning, Su Mu lit a torch. Its flames distorted his face, greatly making him appear evil. Kai Yang, I warn you never to let me see your face in the future. Otherwise, I will not let you live or die, Su Mu said while grinding his teeth. Just as he was preparing to throw the torch into the hut, a person to his side tapped his shoulder and whilst releasing a bloodthirsty aura inquired of him. What is this for? Su Mu didn't even need to think before replying. Burning a house. Why are you burning my house? That person's voice carried a hint of anger. Your house. Su Mu curled his lip ferociously and turned his head. As soon as he saw the speaker, he immediately jumped to the side like a frightened rabbit seeing a wolf. Then, with an exaggerated movement, he assumed a defensive posture. His face was filled with alarm and the hairs on the back of his neck all rose. It was because the appearance of the person who had spoken was too frightening. Not only were his clothes all tattered, his hair was messed up, with plants sticking out all over the place and dirty beyond compare. His body also displayed numerous bloody marks. His clothes were blood-stained and a bulging bag was tied around his back. God only knew what was in there. A gentle breeze blew past, causing his tattered pants to flap, revealing a strong and sturdy leg covered in leg hair. The wind carried with it the stench from Kai Yang's several dirty body. Su Mu was unable to stomach that smell. That appearance, coupled with the blood and smell, made Su Mu want to vomit up his 3 meals. That posture, that manner, was strangely familiar. If he were to hold a broken bowl in one hand, then he would look exactly like a beggar. But why did he feel that this horrifying person looked familiar? Su Mu looked more closely, becoming more and more confused. After he thought for a while, he cried out, Kai Yang! If it's not Kai Yang, then who could it be? Even though his body shape had changed and his face was covered in filth, how could Su Mu, who hated Kai Yang deep down in his bones, not recognize him? If he could not recognize him, then who could? Kai Yang also recognized Su Mu. Grinning widely, he revealed a set of ivory-white teeth. If it isn't fellow disciple Su who brazenly tried to frame others in Black Plum Village? The voice that said so was full of ridicule, turning Su Mu's white face a deep red. Stamping his foot, Su Mu retorted, Kai Yang, you did not choose to walk the path to heaven but chose to walk through hell's gates. You are destined to die today. You want to find issue with me? His brow creasing, Kai Yang asked. Nonsense, Su Mu cried proudly. You thought I came to see you? If you have something to settle with me, come and find me. Why do you need to burn down my house? Kai Yang questioned. Su Mu promptly threw the touch away and rushed to step on it, like he was stamping on Kai Yang directly. Venting on the torch, after a while, the torch was finally stamped out. This moment of pause allowed the people present to understand what was happening. They finally realized that Kai Yang had not run away from fear of Su Mu, but rather that he had only left to complete some business. But what business did he have to complete which had caused his appearance to become so appalling? Such bloodiness, isn't it a bit too much? Also, the tears in his clothes were obviously made by some sort of sharp weapon. Who did he go and fight with? And was it a life and death type of fight?